Chapter 296. In an instant, a long pit about 2 meters high was formed on the roadside, formed by these ants. The holy light on Caitlin's body disappeared. She looked at the long pit, and her expression changed slightly. She said, "It seems that many people have died in this forest." Reynolds heard her words and walked forward. He couldn't help but cry out when he saw the deep pit. The deep pit was filled with densely packed bones. There were human bones, animal bones, all kinds of rusty weapons, and round skeletons. It seemed that these ants usually covered the pit and quietly waited for their prey. "Hey, Reynolds, am I powerful?" Caitlin looked at Reynolds and suddenly asked. Reynolds nodded and said, "Caitlin, was that your skill just now?" It was like Caitlin's ultimate move in Mobile Legends, a shield that could offset high damage. Caitlin still ignored Reynolds' question. She continued to tease him. "Do you have the urge to kneel down and kiss my feet?" Reynolds' expression changed after being teased by her again and again. He finally couldn't hold it in and said, "What do you mean?" He would say some ridiculous things at the drop of a hat. "Why would I kiss your feet? I'm not a pervert. Do you think I'm those people in your country? At the end of the day, if you really want me to kiss your feet, then take off your silver armor boots. Let me lick the soles of your feet and suck your toes." Caitlin was shocked. She didn't expect Reynolds to be so bold. She had been a princess of a big country since she was young and lived in luxury. She had never heard such vulgar words. At this time, after hearing everything Reynolds said, her face turned red for the first time. She held it in and finally said, "If I didn't have a trace of strange hope for you, I would kill you right now." After saying that, she rode on the unicorn and continued to walk without caring about Reynolds. Reynolds shook his head as he felt a trace of absurdity in his heart. What the hell was this? The whereabouts of Natan and Nas were still unknown. Why was he following Caitlin for no reason? Reynolds laughed self-deprecatingly and followed her. At this time, he needed to follow her and get more information. A few hours later, Reynolds and Caitlin walked out of the forest and came to a town that had turned into ruins. Caitlin looked pensive. She frowned as she looked at the corpses that could be seen everywhere in the town. Reynolds was already used to seeing corpses. He looked at the dead people. Some of them were ordinary citizens, while others were armored soldiers. It's probably because of Lawson's invasion. Reynolds, who didn't have a good impression of the Rosen Kingdom, coldly said. Caitlin shook her head and said, "It's not that simple. You should have heard about the murder of Rosen's Ross, right?" Reynolds nodded in response. Caitlin sighed. She held the spear in her hand and jumped off the unicorn. She said to Renault, "Someone's coming. Get ready for battle." Reynolds was shocked. He took out the Yuchong sword and held it in his hand. He looked around vigilantly. As expected, many soldiers and civilians emerged from every corner of the town and gradually surrounded Reynolds and Caitlin. Were they all hiding? Who were they? The eyes of these people were filled with undisguised bestial lust and a trace of terror. Everyone stared at Caitlin. Some of them even reached their hands into their pants and started moving up and down, naked and fearless. "Little girl, in this wilderness, we were just thinking about how to get some meat, and you came to us. Ha 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 ha. Damn, this body, this breasts. I really want to F***CK her to death. Don't F***King kill her. Where can we find such a coquettish girl in this broken place?" For a moment, vulgarities were endless. Even Reynolds was so angry that his face turned green. He pointed his dagger at these wretched scumbags and scolded, "You're all courting death." These people were not moved at all. One of them, who looked thin and pale, looked at Reynolds with shining eyes and said in a coquettish voice, "Little brother, you've got character. I like people like you." After that, everyone burst into laughter. Caitlin sighed and said, "I thought that since you were Lawson's soldiers, I would let you live." After saying that, her aura changed completely. She pointed her holy spear forward and said coldly, "All of you die." Reynolds could not help but breathe a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt a sense of loss. "Who is she? She looks like a hero in a game, Caitlin." Reynolds stood up and looked at the clear sky again. Suddenly, he felt a chill on his neck. Looking carefully, it was the girl from yesterday. He did not know when she appeared, but she put her spear on his neck and looked at him coldly. What are you doing? Reynolds was shocked and asked. I looked at this boy with complicated feelings. All the emotions, anger, malice, and ambition in my heart gathered into one sentence. I am Caitlin, Lawson's queen. How about it? Do you want to follow me? On this day in the king's realm, there was a big commotion. The structure of the continent also quietly changed. Perhaps this change would not affect anything, but due to the uncertainty of this world, a certain boundary point disorder, there would be unimaginable changes. The first to suffer were the small countries and tribes around Lawson. Due to the strange death of Prince Ross and the rebellion of Princess Caitlin, the entire country was filled with a state of madness. Everyone was a soldier. Every citizen, every child, every woman, every creature picked up a weapon and under the leadership of Lawson's Duke Charles, invaded the western region. Burn, kill, plunder, rob. Massacring cities, setting fire to various tribes, killing, burying alive, all kinds of heartless things. From the western region of the king's realm, they slowly nibbled at the entire continent. Looks like the rebellion of the western Lawson has caused a lot of momentum. In the middle of the Luo River, a drunk young man was lying on a small boat and muttering to himself. A head of long silver hair, a delicate and handsome face, an unparalleled stature, and an aura that spread from the boat to the surroundings, all showed the identity of this man. Chapter 297. It's been a long time since I drank Carol's cream wine. This Chong and City's wine is tasteless, but it's a pity to throw it away. The man sat up and poured the wine from the gourd into the clear Luo River. He laughed and said loudly, I hope you don't wake up from your drunken stupor. As the man laughed, the boat went further and further away until it disappeared at the end of the Luo River. On the other side of the continent, in a mysterious valley, a girl sat on the ground. She was sweating profusely as she asked Jiao Chan, who was wearing a pink veil, Sister Chan, is the Rosen Kingdom in turmoil very close to the Black Sand Kingdom? Jiao Chan looked at Lin Ling and said, If you are worried about his safety, then get up quickly. Lin Ling gritted her teeth and stood up. She didn't say anything else. She gripped her dagger and rushed towards Jiao Chan. Carol, Forest of Horrors. It was unusually quiet today. There were no terrifying creatures. The berserk spider was also killed by Natan's group. There was a clear stream nearby. After a night of flowing, the blood had completely disappeared, leaving behind a clear stream. What did you say? Reynolds looked at the girl in front of him and asked. So it really was Caitlin. Reynolds was only a little surprised, but he soon got used to it. Very good. All the heroes that he was familiar with had appeared one by one in front of him with the flow of time. But what was this world like? Reynolds was a little confused. He felt the heavy and cold spear on his neck and said, Okay, I will follow you. There was no other way. It seemed that if he said no, he would be killed on the spot. Caitlin stared at Reynolds for a full minute before putting down the spear. Your wound is fatal. How are you still alive? Reynolds was startled. Hearing Caitlin's question, he looked down at the wound on his chest. Cold sweat dripped down. Because it had been left there for a long time, the wound that went from his back to his chest had begun to inflame. A lot of pus flowed out. In addition to the red and black blood, there was also yellow pus mixed in. But the strangest thing was that although his chest hurt, it wasn't the kind of pain that suffocated him. At least, it was bearable. I'm not sure either. Reynolds hesitated for a moment, but decided not to tell Caitlin about the strange space in his body. It seemed that the strange light in his body was sustaining his life. Caitlin didn't say anything. She stabbed the spear in the ground and said, Take off your clothes. Reynolds was shocked. When he saw Caitlin's expression, he realized that he had misunderstood. Caitlin revealed a playful smile and slowly said, I asked you to take off your clothes, of course, to treat your injuries. What else do you think I would do to you? Reynolds didn't say anything. He revealed an awkward smile and slowly took off his jacket, then took off the thermal clothes and long johns inside. The clothes were all thrown to the ground, and Reynolds instantly sneezed. It was too cold. Caitlin stepped forward and touched Reynolds' body with her hand. Reynolds was touched and instantly trembled. It was so warm. Caitlyn's hands seemed to have some kind of magical power. No, it should be said that Caitlyn's entire body seemed to have a warm aura. It was like a fireplace where the bonfire inside was crackling softly, making people feel blissful. This was just being touched by her hands. Reynolds was a little uncomfortable. He looked at Caitlyn's face at such a close distance and actually blushed a little. Long golden hair, exotic yet incomparably exquisite facial features, and a devilish figure right in front of his eyes, ready to jump out at any moment. Reynolds gasped. He found that Caitlyn's hands had touched his wound and seemed to have forcefully poked it. Even like this, you don't feel much pain. Caitlyn frowned her beautiful eyebrows and looked up at Reynolds with bad intentions. Just as Reynolds was feeling awkward, something miraculous suddenly happened. Without any warning, a layer of invisible ripples appeared in the silent void. This layer of ripples spread from Reynolds's wound to the surroundings. Gently, it swept through the entire forest and floated to the pure white clouds in the distant sky that were dyed by the sun. The entire Calor forest was enveloped in this beautiful halo. Reynolds's body suddenly emitted a layer of green halo. This halo was refreshing and pleasant, as if it was emitting its own fragrance. It was like the stamens of daisies that bloomed in the open air, like the gentle ripples on the water's surface under the willows, or like the quiet spring fields under the drizzle. If this feeling had to be summarized, it would be the aura of life and nature. At the same time, Reynolds discovered that the wound on his chest actually showed signs of healing under the green halo. The pus and blood that flowed out began to naturally dissipate, and the inflamed marks also began to reduce. In the end, the hideous wound slowly reconnected and healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Reynolds's eyes widened as he watched everything that was happening. The wound completely healed, and Caitlyn's hands left Reynolds's body. Is this your innate skill of healing? In their eyes, Elena's words and actions were undoubtedly the best joke. Did you hear that? This girl wants to kill us. Ha ha, I'll take good care of her in a while. All the soldiers were swearing. At this moment, a man in golden armor walked out from inside. This man was 2 meters tall and had a huge physique. He held a huge axe in his hand and looked majestic and murderous. His eyes were filled with beastly desire as he sized up Elena's alluring figure. He licked his lips and roared, "You're already mine. I want to possess you." After saying that, he walked towards Elena. When the others saw this, their faces were filled with excitement and regret. Borg was the man who was the best at fighting among them. When he attacked, basically no one could withstand his power. Unfortunately, the women who had been fooled by Borg basically had no chance of surviving. Reynolds took a few steps back. He wasn't worried about Elena's safety at all. He only looked at them with slight sympathy. "Why? Aren't you afraid of me?" Borg walked to a place about 2 meters away from Elena and looked down at her from above. Elena's face was cold as she said, "It's the country's misfortune to have scum like you in baby card." "What did you say?" Borg was furious when he heard that. He raised the huge axe in his hand and chopped down on Elena's head. Chapter 298. Surprisingly, Elena did not move an inch. She did not even try to dodge the attack. Instead, she raised her left arm and easily blocked Potter's giant axe attack. Potter was furious. He wanted to raise his axe again, but the axe did not move at all. He looked down and saw that Elena had used her left hand to hold the axe blade. What terrifying strength! Potter was terrified. He looked at Elena in front of him and wanted to throw away his axe and run away. However, he was controlled by the invisible pressure in her eyes and did not dare to move. "You will be the first cannon fodder that I prepare to clean up," Elena said expressionlessly. She raised the spear in her right hand and thrust it forward. Poochie, the guy who had his throat pierced by Elena's spear, screamed and knelt on the ground. Blood instantly flowed all over the ground. The surrounding people were silent. They were stunned by what had just happened. They looked at Elena, who flung her spear to dry the blood stains, and walked towards them expressionlessly. "Run!" No one knew who shouted first, but in the next moment, almost everyone scattered in all directions, fleeing into the ruins of the town. There were also people who shouted as they ran, "Just you wait. I'll let you go this time," and other comical words. Elena frowned. She pointed her spear in the direction they were running. In an instant, a pure colored light arrow shot out from the tip of the spear. The person who had cursed the most fiercely had his throat pierced. The scene of dark red blood spurting out made Reynolds, who was far away, tremble. Even though he had seen others kill people and seen a large number of corpses, this kind of primitive and direct death still shocked Reynolds. And when those people saw such a scene, they ran away with all their might. Soon, they scattered and fled into the depths of the ruined town. Elena snorted. Her body moved forward as if she had teleported and chased after them. Not long after, a large number of screams came from afar. Reynolds followed Elena's footsteps and ran into the depths of the town. Only then did he realize that those people who were running away were all caught up by Elena and killed with a single shot. Looking at Elena's blonde hair fluttering in the wind, such a beauty was like Azrael reaping their lives. At least in Reynolds's vision, Elena had caught up to and killed all of the fleeing men. At this moment, she was holding a long gun. With a chilling calmness, she walked to each of the fallen men and shot them one by one. Every shot was aimed at their vital points. From the beginning to the end, she didn't say a single word, and there wasn't the slightest fluctuation in her emotions. It was as if what she said was true, they were just cannon fodder. It couldn't even be considered a life. He had even dared to say those words to her before. Even though Reynolds was now Elena's subordinate, he could not help but feel fear in his heart. He felt that his worldview had been greatly impacted. Countless lives turned out to be nothing more than ants in front of the strong. Reynolds stood there in a daze, not daring to move an inch. "Reynolds, help me search their bodies and see if there are any tokens," Eileen said to Renault. Only then did Reynolds react. He hurriedly followed her instructions and searched the clothes of the dead men one by one. Looking at their miserable deaths, Reynolds resisted the nausea in his stomach and searched them one by one. "What happened to you? You look like you are about to die," Elena asked as she walked up to Renault. Reynolds raised his head and looked at her alluring figure. He had a feeling that she was a goddess born for war and killing. Seeing that Reynolds did not speak, Eileen teased, "What happened, my subordinate? After seeing my heroic appearance, do you have the urge to kneel down and kiss my feet?" "No." When Reynolds heard Eileen's words, the fear and discomfort in his heart instantly relaxed. He had a feeling that Eileen had purposely said that this time to dispel the nervousness in Reynolds' heart. "Found it, is it this?" Reynolds felt a hard object from the chest of a dead man. He took it out and saw that it was a round metal token. There was a lion head engraved on it. It looked very majestic. "This is it." Eileen took the token and frowned. Reynolds saw this and asked, "What is this?" Eileen said, "This is the symbol of the first commander of the kingdom of Babica, Marshal Zero." After a pause, she said, "It's getting late. Let's find a place to rest first. I will explain it to you later." Reynolds and Eileen found a dilapidated house in this ruined town. It looked like it used to be more luxurious, but due to the chaos of war, it had become dilapidated. When they opened the door, there was a strong smell of rotten wood inside. Eileen took a look and did not enter. She said to Reynolds, "Reynolds, go inside and find a room. I will go and settle the unicorn down." At this point, the two settled down in a house in the ruined town. The two sat in front of a campfire to warm themselves. When night fell, the weather outside would become abnormally cold. Reynolds told Eileen his purpose for coming here. He also asked her if the whereabouts of Naton and Naz were related to Babica. The answer he received was that she did not know. "Looking at your hair color, you should be from the Far East. Tell me which country you are from. As my subordinate, don't hide anything from me." Eileen stared at Reynolds and asked. Reynolds hesitated, not knowing how to answer. This was because he did not belong to any country in this world. Seeing Reynolds' reaction, Eileen smiled and asked, "What? Is it not convenient to say?" In Reynolds' eyes, this smile was a fake one. He was sure that if he did not say anything, he would suffer bad things. However, Reynolds did not want to tell her that he was a transmigrator. At least, he would not say it before confirming whether Eileen was a friend or foe. After thinking for a while, Reynolds said, I am not actually a citizen of a big country. I am from a small country on the mainland. Well, tell me about the system in your country. What is it like? I am very interested. Reynolds thought for a while and said, My country is a country without a royal family. In other words, it is not an empire. Eileen was curious. How is that possible? A country without a ruler? There is no king? Reynolds shook his head and said, Yes. In my country, her system of government, we call it democracy. Democracy? Chapter 299. Eileen thought for a moment and said in surprise, Democracy means that the citizens of the country are the masters? Reynolds looked at Eileen and said in surprise, Yes. As expected of the royal family of the Babika country, she understood it immediately. That's impossible. Reynolds, tell me in detail. Eileen was obviously interested in Reynolds's words. This democracy, you are right. It means that the citizens of the country are the masters. Without an emperor, the citizens themselves elect a group of people to be in charge of the country's affairs. Eileen's eyes lit up when she heard this. This was unprecedented in the king's world. Even the Tang Empire, which was known as the most powerful country on the continent, had an emperor. Eileen thought for a moment and said, With so many people in power, what should we do if there are differences? There will always be differences, right? Reynolds smiled and explained, Among these people, there will always be a master and an assistant. The one with the highest official position, we call him the president. After thinking for a moment, Reynolds didn't know why he didn't talk about the political system of his own country, but simply talked about the political system of the West. The president is similar to your king, but his authority and ruling power are far inferior to the king. At least, the president doesn't inherit his father's position, but is elected. The most important point is that his authority is limited in many ways, and it is impossible for him to be the only one who is powerful. Reynolds roughly talked about some separation of powers, Declaration of Independence, and the most basic historical issues that everyone knew. These things actually made Eileen intoxicated as she listened to them. She heard that the Congress could refute and reject the president's plan, and the president couldn't decide the country's right to make laws, and most importantly, the Congress could impeach the president from office. Maybe it was because of these that Eileen's 3 views were greatly impacted. Her breathing began to become hurried, and her eyes became more and more transparent. She was the chosen one, an extremely intelligent person. After listening to Reynolds's words, she suddenly became enlightened and had a great interest in the so-called democracy. Reynolds didn't expect that the things that everyone knew in his world would come here, like a great prophet. It seemed that this was the biggest privilege of a transmigrator. Reynolds couldn't help but chuckle when he saw Elena pondering over Reynolds's words. Eileen was awakened by Reynolds's laughter and sighed. I never expected that your country would be so advanced. After a brief pause, she asked, Reynolds, your country must be very powerful, right? Reynolds nodded and said, Yes, my country is the most powerful in our country. He thought to himself, Of course, my country is the strongest country in the world. After thinking for a while, Reynolds threw out another bombshell and asked, Eileen, seeing that you are very interested, I might as well tell you that my country's theoretical system will not work in your country, or even in the entire king's realm. Elena thought for a moment and nodded. You're right. The Babika kingdom has royalty, nobles, and knights. It won't work. Reynolds waved his hand and smiled. No, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that even if the king of your country is willing to abdicate, our theoretical system won't work. Why? Reynolds laughed and looked at the woman who had developed a respectful and serious expression. He suddenly felt proud and said, Because the wisdom of every citizen hasn't awakened. How can you talk about democracy? What do you mean? Eileen was a little stunned. Elena, let me ask you something. In your country, how many people are literate and have received education? Eileen frowned. And in my country, everyone is literate. Everyone is studying in the school. Everyone knows history. Everyone can talk about the past and the present. Reynolds said, I think it's impossible in your country, right? Eileen let out a long sigh and said, "It's impossible. Everyone is literate. How is this possible? It should be known that those who can go to the school to cultivate are the children of the royal family with money and power, or people with great talent. Ordinary people are not qualified to study in the school." An hour later, Eileen finally woke up from her contemplation. She saw that Reynolds was lying in front of the bonfire and taking a nap. Reynolds narrowed his eyes and asked, "Why, what did you think?" Looking at Eileen, Reynolds laughed in his heart. He didn't expect her to be shocked by the common knowledge that everyone knew. Eileen sighed and looked at Reynolds for a while. She said solemnly, "I hereby announce, Reynolds, from now on, you are no longer my subordinate. I allow you to be my friend." Reynolds woke up and asked, "What do you mean by friend?" Elena revealed a rare smile that seemed normal to Reynolds. She said, "That's what friends mean. In other words, I can protect you from now on. You have to tell me about your country and what you know every day. You will be my right-hand man." Reynolds was speechless. "What kind of friend is this?" Eileen looked at Reynolds's unwilling face and frowned. "Why, are you not happy to be my friend?" She paused and seemed to have thought of something. She smiled maliciously and said, "Or do you still want to be my subordinate and lick my feet?" At night, it was almost time to sleep. The weather in the ruined town was extremely cold. Even if Reynolds curled up beside the bonfire, only one side of his body didn't feel cold. The other side of his body that wasn't facing the bonfire would still feel an inexplicable chill. In addition, he didn't have any blankets or other items to keep out the cold. He only had the clothes on his body. This made Reynolds very unhappy. Eileen didn't care. She was indeed a powerful person. She stabbed her spear into the wooden floor and leaned against it. She just sat on the floor and slept without lying down. Looking at her sleeping posture with her eyes closed, Reynolds couldn't help but smile. This was probably her true self. She still looked like a young girl. "Reynolds, what are you looking at? Are you planning to lick my feet while I'm sleeping? You pervert." Eileen seemed to have eyes on her head. She felt Reynolds's gaze and sneered. Reynolds was speechless. "You are the pervert. Your whole family are perverts." Reynolds ignored Eileen and thought about what Eileen said to him just now. Chapter 300. She is the princess of the Rosen Kingdom. She killed her father, the king of the Rosen Kingdom. She rebelled against her own kingdom. She used her innate skill, Gale, to escape from the Rosen Kingdom to Carol in just half a day. She doesn't want to return to the Rosen Kingdom in the near future. She wants to make a comeback. Thinking of this, Reynolds had a headache. He glanced at Eileen next to him and found that she seemed to have fallen asleep. Her long blonde hair, long eyelashes, delicate skin, and her breaths were like orchids. Her chest was moving up and down, and her arms were wrapped around her chest. She looked like a sleeping baby. "She's about the same age as me," Reynolds thought to himself. "A girl carrying so many things." Maybe it's because they grew up in different environments that he can't understand the thoughts of the royal family. He's not a person of this world, and his current purpose is to go to the distant academy of the Tang Empire to study, become stronger, and then go to the burial ground to find Lin Ling. But now, Natan, Nasi, and the others he knew have disappeared without a trace. He's very worried about their safety. Where did they go? Reynolds touched the phone in his pocket and turned it on, only to find that it was turned off. There's no battery at all. So, the only thing that can prove that he's an earthling has also lost its effect. Reynolds shook his head, stood up, and walked out of the door. "Where are you going?" Eileen, who was at the side, suddenly blurted out, giving Reynolds a huge fright. "You're not asleep?" Eileen opened her eyes and looked at Reynolds. "I'm not a deep sleeper. I'll notice even the slightest movement. This is the basic element of a warrior." Looking at Reynolds' dumbfounded expression, Eileen asked again, "Where are you going?" "The toilet." Eileen didn't speak. Reynolds didn't look back and walked out of the door. As soon as he walked out of the door, a cold wind hit his face, causing Reynolds to shiver. It was dark outside, full of dead silence. The stars and the red waning moon in the sky seemed to be crying. War is really something that can't be helped. Reynolds sighed. After finishing his business outside, he was ready to go back. Just then, something that looked like a dog on the ground scurried toward them. Since there was no light, only the faint moonlight. Reynolds couldn't tell what it was on the ground. "Let's hurry back." Reynolds was a little scared. He hurriedly returned to Elena's side. This way he would feel safe. Hastily walking into a house, Reynolds looked around and cried out, "Not good. Seems to have entered the wrong house." It was all because the sky was too dark and the bonfire didn't seem to be very bright. Reynolds cursed inwardly. Just as he was about to leave, he saw a weak light in the room. Reynolds walked over and took a closer look. He realized that it was a dry well. At the bottom of the dry well, there was a faint light. Just as he finished speaking, the beam of light shot up from the bottom of the well. Before Reynolds could react, he felt his upper body being hugged by something. Reynolds screamed. Only then did he realize that the thing hugging him was a huge monster with a human face and a snake body. The human face had the appearance of a woman with long black hair and pale skin. She actually had 8 arms. These 8 arms were all hugging Reynolds' upper body. "Human, your body has a strong vitality." The monster opened its mouth and spoke. It stuck out its tongue and licked Reynolds' cheek. F*CK. F*King, let go of me. After a brief moment of fear, Reynolds began to struggle. However, he realized that under the restraint of the monster's 8 arms, he couldn't move at all. Whoosh! The monster's entire body rushed out of the dry well. Reynolds was horrified to find that the monster's long string of bones was regenerating at a speed visible to the naked eye. How satisfying! Power is flowing out of my body. Because you have that thing. The monster let out a charming laugh. It stuck out its tongue and kept licking Reynolds' cheek as if it wanted to eat him up. "You F*King, let go of me." Reynolds screamed as his right hand broke free and pushed towards the monster's face with his palm. Unexpectedly, a beam of light shot out from Reynolds' palm and instantly enveloped the monster's face. The monster screamed. The arm that was grabbing Reynolds was broken by the beam of light. Its entire body fell back into the dry well. "Apocalypse bracelet. I will definitely get it." Reynolds fell and sat on the ground, panting heavily as he watched the monster's disappearing figure, still in a state of shock. Apocalypse bracelet? Reynolds was puzzled. He looked at the bracelet on his right hand. It seemed to be emitting light. Could it be this? Reynolds stood up and removed the monster's arm that was still grabbing onto his clothes. He threw it on the ground. "What the hell is this?" Looking at the bracelet, Reynolds didn't think anymore and rushed out of the house. The familiar house, the slightly bright bonfire. Elena's eyes were closed. Her sleeping face looked rather holy. Seeing this, Reynolds' hanging heart instantly relaxed. Whenever he saw Elena, he would feel an inexplicable sense of security. Reynolds looked at her and realized that she was probably asleep. He hesitated for a moment and decided not to wake her up. He also lay down beside the bonfire and fell asleep. The next day, the sun was bright. When Reynolds opened his eyes, he realized that Elena wasn't here. Reynolds was shocked. He hurriedly got up and looked around. The bonfire was extinguished. There wasn't much left. The house was empty and cold. Reynolds walked out of the house and looked for traces of Elena. It wasn't that he was worried. Without Elena by his side, he would feel insecure. "Elena!" Reynolds shouted. He looked around the house and realized that her unicorn was still leisurely basking in the sun. It seemed that Elena hadn't left. Reynolds was relieved. When he was about to return to the house, he saw the room that he had mistakenly entered last night. The dry well inside, it was daytime. The inside was also illuminated by the sunlight. There was nothing to be afraid of. Reynolds hesitated for a moment and walked into the house. Reynolds was very careful. He was afraid that another monster would jump out and lick him. Thinking about how that human-faced, snake-bodied demonic beast had licked him with its tongue, Reynolds felt a chill run down his spine. He slowly walked towards a dry well and carefully stuck his head out. When he saw the scene in the well, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. Chapter 301. The dry well was about 7-8 meters deep, and it was empty. There wasn't even a rat, let alone a huge monster. Where did it go? Reynolds looked at the bracelet on his wrist. This was called the Apocalypse bracelet. If he kept wearing this thing, that demonic beast would definitely come again. Reynolds frowned, not knowing what to do. At this moment, a voice came from behind Reynolds. "You're awake?" When Reynolds heard this voice, he hurriedly turned his head and saw Elena walking over from an unknown place. "Eileen, where did you go?" "The toilet." Reynolds was speechless when he heard Eileen's short answer. "What's wrong, Reynolds? Are you so afraid that I'll leave you behind? You're really a pervert." Eileen couldn't help but tease when she saw Reynolds' reaction. "No." Reynolds was speechless. He stretched out his right hand and asked Eileen, "Do you know what this bracelet is? Last night, I was attacked by a monster with a human face and a snake's body in the dry well." Eileen glanced at it and said, "I noticed this bracelet when I first saw you, but I don't know where it came from." She paused and said, "But I'm sure that this bracelet is emitting a faint aura of life. It looks very rare." She glanced at Reynolds and didn't ask further. Reynolds was silent. He didn't know where this bracelet came from, but he definitely couldn't throw it away. Moreover, the space in his body was worth exploring. As the two of them were talking, a shrill cry came from afar. It sounded like a woman being tortured. However, this cry was louder and more bone-piercing. "What's that sound?" Reynolds looked into the distance and saw a long and huge monster rising from the ground. Looking closely, it was the familiar monster with a human face and a snake's body. It was the monster that attacked Reynolds last night. In the morning, it didn't look like a human face and a snake's body. It was obviously a huge centipede with a human face. "That's it," Reynolds cried out. "Last night, there was nothing in the well. When I went there, the monster came back to life and tried to steal my bracelet." Eileen didn't even look at the demonic beast as she coldly said to Reynolds, "Ah, so it's this kind of trash. Even this kind of trash can scare you. Do as you see fit." After saying that, he ignored Reynolds and walked into the house. "I'm going to sleep. Don't let it disturb me." Reynolds stared blankly as Elena entered the house. "Elena." Looking at this woman's ruthless look, Reynolds cursed in his heart. "Give me the apocalypse bracelet." At this time, the 100-legged witch discovered Reynolds. Like an arrow leaving the bow, her huge body rushed towards Reynolds. "Damn it!" Renaud gritted his teeth, turned around, and ran. This 100-legged, which was about 10 meters long and possessed boundless strength. Reynolds wondered if his discipline skill would be effective against her. Reynolds fled to the densest part of town. In that case, the demonic beast should slow down his speed. "Pata!" Crackle. As if deliberately slapping Reynolds in the face, this 100-legged witch not only didn't let the houses obstruct her path, but instead used her huge body to sweep through the houses. Like a destructive beast, she rushed straight towards Reynolds. How could Reynolds' speed be faster than this witch? She quickly caught up and wrapped her long body around him. "Apocalypse bracelet. I finally got you." Reynolds was wrapped around by her body until he couldn't breathe. He wanted to pull his arm out, but he couldn't move it at all. Reynolds' mind moved and the space in his body appeared. He sent his consciousness towards the discipline skill. Rumble. Without any warning, a pink lightning bolt quickly struck down from the sky, ruthlessly striking the demonic beast's body. The demonic beast felt pain and loosened its grip on Reynolds. Reynolds slid to the ground. Panting, he looked at the infuriated demonic beast, stood up, and hurriedly ran away. Seems like discipline skill was useful. "Then, I'll punish you to death." With his mindset, Reynolds prepared to use discipline skill again. But this time, when Reynolds looked at the skill pain in his body, he was shocked. The discipline skills icon had turned gray. It seemed like there was a countdown, as if it had cooled down. Using a skill, there was a cooldown, but why could he use purification skill without limit? Without noticing, Reynolds screamed as a sharp pain came from his right hand. He raised his hand to look and found that the witch had quickly bitten off Reynolds' bracelet and tore off a piece of flesh. How could this be? Reynolds looked at the demonic beast swallowing the bracelet and said with hatred. The moment the 100-legged witch swallowed the bracelet, Reynolds looked at her changes with vigilance. In the blink of an eye after she swallowed the bracelet, the witch's originally fair, human face changed instantly. Its human skin quickly fell off, revealing a terrifying and ferocious appearance. Its two eyes were as large as pebbles, and its skin instantly turned black and tightened. Its original cherry mouth fell off, revealing a bloody mouth filled with dense, sharp teeth. So satisfying, power filled my body in an instant. Looking at this witch's face of enjoyment, Reynolds couldn't help but feel nauseous. You're already useless. After the transformation, the 100-legged witch's strength and agility increased by many times. Seeing that Reynolds was still standing by the side, she ferociously pounced towards him. Reynolds was burning with anxiety. Seeing that the discipline skill was still in cooldown, he could only turn around and run. The only way now was to run to Eileen's side. Without thinking too much, looking at the witch's bloody mouth pouncing towards him, Reynolds rolled and crawled back the way he came. "Eileen, come and save me." Looking at the huge monster behind him wriggling towards him, Reynolds was so scared that his legs were about to turn to jelly. At this time, he couldn't care about his face and shouted Eileen's name loudly. "What mess, my friend?" Eileen walked out of the house unhurriedly. Looking at the flustered Reynolds being chased by the 100-legged witch, she ridiculed him. The 100-legged witch saw Eileen's appearance, and the ferocious look on her face became stronger. She roared, "All of you are my food." Reynolds hurriedly hid behind Eileen and said, "Eileen, don't mock me." My bracelet was swallowed into her stomach. Eileen didn't look at Reynolds and snorted, "Just hide behind me obediently." Chapter 302. After saying that, she raised her head and said to the 100-legged witch provocatively, "Hand over the bracelet, or I will kill you." "Stinky brat." The 100-legged witch could not stand the provocation. At this moment, she scolded loudly and rushed over. In an instant, she tangled up with Elena and Reynolds. "Hee hee, bragging brat. Watch how I torture you." Elena did not move and said coldly to the 100-legged witch, "Do you know why I asked you to hand over the bracelet first before killing you?" Seeing that it did not respond, Elena showed a fierce expression and said sternly, "Because I am afraid of destroying the bracelet that I am curious about." Immediately, a holy light suddenly appeared on Elena's body and enveloped her and Reynolds' body. "Huh!" Elena struggled hard and broke free from the 100-legged witch's long body. After a few flips in the air, Elena landed on the ground with one knee on the ground. She summoned her spear, Holy Glory, and shouted, "Come, monster! Die!" The 100-legged witch opened her bloody mouth and rushed towards Elena. In the next moment, Elena's body was like an arrow that left the bow. She was like a yellow holy light that pierced through the 100-legged witch. Her spear danced wildly, and her body moved nimbly around the 100-legged witch's body. In just a moment, the 100-legged witch's body was cut into pieces by Elena and scattered on the ground. So powerful, she only used one attack. Reynolds looked at the side in surprise. Useless trash." Elena kept her spear and looked at the scattered pieces of flesh on the ground. "Look for it yourself and see where the bracelet is." Hearing Elena's words, Reynolds walked over and looked at the pieces of flesh on the ground. They were still squirming, as if they wanted to gather together and put back together. "Can you see the glowing pieces of flesh? Your bracelet should be inside." Elena said to Reynolds, "If you don't take out the bracelet quickly, these pieces of flesh will return to their original state. No matter how you kill them, they will not die." "I found it." Reynolds carefully took out the bracelet from the witch's mouth that had already turned into a piece of meat. At this moment, something miraculous happened. After Reynolds took out the bracelet, the wriggling pieces of flesh on the ground immediately lost their vitality and stopped moving. After a while, they turned into a pile of bones. What a magical bracelet. It might be a divine weapon from some country that accidentally fell into your hands. Reynolds was speechless as he put the bracelet back on his right hand. "Hiss!" Elena looked at Reynolds and teased. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Reynolds nodded. He stretched out his right hand and said, "A piece of flesh was torn off. Fortunately, the artery was not injured." After experiencing such strange things in this ruined town, Elena decided to leave this place. At the very least, he had to change to another place to see if any demonic beast would attack Reynolds. Eileen and Reynolds were riding on a tall, snow-white unicorn as they galloped through the wilderness at high speed. Reynolds was not used to riding this kind of thing, not to mention riding the same thing as Elena. Reynolds, who was originally Elena's subordinate, only had the right to walk on the ground. However, now that Elena had mysteriously acknowledged him as a friend, he could sit on the same level as Elena and ride on the same mount as her. The only awkward thing was that Reynolds was riding at the back while Elena was riding at the front. During the ride, the road was bumpy. It was inevitable that there would be friction between the legs and some subtle reactions. Reynolds was embarrassed and speechless. Elena, on the other hand, did not have any reaction. She kept asking Reynolds questions along the way. Reynolds felt awkward as he tried to hold back his laughter. He could tell that Elena's snow-white neck was already showing a tinge of red, even though she was asking nonchalantly. Was she shy? The unicorn's speed was very fast. If Reynolds was not holding onto Elena's armor while riding on it, he would have been thrown to the ground by the inertia. The whole morning passed. Everywhere Reynolds and Elena went, it was a vast expanse of whiteness. In the distance, it was the most boundless, as if it was a kingdom of ice and snow. There was still smoke rising from the kitchen chimneys. Elena said, "According to my map, we've arrived at the Snowfall tribe. The climate here is cold, and it will snow heavily. Then it will cover this place and turn it into a silent land." Snowfall tribe? Reynolds thought. It seemed that they were getting farther and farther away from the Babika kingdom. This village gave Reynolds the feeling that besides the vast expanse of whiteness, there was only coldness. It was really cold. Even at the edge of the village, Reynolds could feel the crystallization when he exhaled. "Elena, aren't you cold?" Reynolds tried to resist the chill and even shivered. He looked at Elena, who was beside him, as if nothing had happened. She was wearing armor that shone with silver light, revealing her smooth and tender thighs. She wore long silver boots. Step by step, she stepped in the snow covering her ankles. "I'm not cold." Hearing Reynolds' question, Elena seemed to find it incredible. She couldn't help but look at Reynolds up and down, her eyes full of ridicule. "Look at the clothes you're wearing. You've wrapped yourself up like a meatball. How dare you say that you're cold?" Reynolds sighed and said, "I'm not as strong as you. In the winter, I'm only wearing armor. My legs and shoulders are exposed. I feel cold just by looking at you." On Earth, there was no shortage of girls who still exposed their thighs in the cold winter. For example, the girls from Japan and Russia were tougher than the other. The only difference was that they felt cold, but Elena didn't feel cold at all. After walking for a short while, they arrived at the village. In the village, there were ordinary residential houses, thatched houses and wooden houses covered with thick weeds. It seemed that they were used to keep out the cold. Reynolds couldn't stand it anymore. He was shivering in the cold. Under Elena's disdainful gaze, he knocked on the door of a family. "You are." The door opened. The person who opened the door seemed to be a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s. His clothes were old and tattered, but they were very thick. One of his legs looked a little strange, as if he was lame. "Hello, we're adventurers. Can we stay in your house for the night?" Reynolds asked. The middle-aged man seemed to hesitate for a moment. He looked at Elena, then nodded and said, "All right, come in." After entering the house, Reynolds instantly felt a wave of warmth enveloping his body. A huge fireplace was burning in the house. There was also a brazier next to it, covered with barbed wire. It seemed that some food was being roasted. Reynolds could tell that this person didn't really want to take them in. He only agreed after seeing Elena. Chapter 303. It's really rare that there are still adventurers in this situation. They sat in front of the fireplace and warmed themselves up. After chatting for a while, Reynolds learned that this person was called Luca. Elena listened to Luca's words and didn't deny it. As the princess of Babika, she was very clear about these things. In this crisis, the village also suffered from strange incidents of unknown origin. Every villager is in a state of panic and rejects all outsiders. Luca's gaze kept sweeping over Elena's face. There was no lust in his expression, but more of a reminiscence. Elena was not interested at all. She just slowly drank the hot tea with her eyebrows furrowed. It seemed that this tea was really disgusting. Reynolds was interested in Luca's words and asked, "Uncle Luca, what are the strange incidents in this village? Isn't it about the war?" As soon as these words came out, Luca's eyes dimmed instantly. They were full of sadness and despair. Reynolds saw this and said awkwardly, "Sorry, uncle. I was rude." After a while, Luca waved his hand and said slowly, "Alas, the strange incidents in the village started a few months ago." He closed his eyes and recalled for a while. He said, "Every 7 days, a villager will mysteriously disappear in the village. There are less than 1,000 people in the village. No one knows if the next person to disappear will be themselves. In addition to the sudden war, almost everyone in the village who can leave has moved away. Only some old, weak, sick, and disabled people are left." Elena suddenly interrupted. "Then what are your plans? Are you going to wait for death here?" "You." Reynolds looked at Luca awkwardly. He thought to himself that Elena was indeed a person with temperament. When Luca heard Elena's words, he was not angry at all. Instead, he was happy. He said, "I won't leave. I want to wait for someone here." Reynolds and Elena looked at him and listened to him talk about the previous situation. It was a bright night, the coldest time of the snowfall village. The cold wind whistled through the mountains, making the old palm trees tremble tiredly. From time to time, there was a whining sound. The wind blew up the snow on the brown palm trees and blew the snow into the moonlight. Even the moonlight was freezing. At the edge of the forest, there was a lonely, run-down house. It was cold, and even the fireplace was broken. This was Uncle Luca's house. Ever since his parents died, Uncle Luca had been living in this old house. It was a rundown house and a rundown Uncle Luca. Luca was 39 years old this year, but he looked like he was 59 years old. He didn't have much to do and was even bitten by a wolf until he was crippled. Not to mention a wife, there wasn't even a girl in the village who was willing to talk to Uncle Luca. Uncle Luca curled himself up in a black blanket and sat beside the fireplace, smoking his pipe and singing loudly. From time to time, he would choke on the thick smoke and cough. For Luca, this was already a very good entertainment. Luca sat by the fireplace and sang loudly. His voice was very loud. Because of the wind blowing against the window, he couldn't hear himself for a while. Uncle Luca was singing happily when he suddenly heard the sound of someone banging on the door. This sound was louder than the wind and louder than Luca's singing. "Who's there?" Uncle Luca shouted. No one answered. The sound of someone banging on the door was still there. Uncle Luca was a little unhappy. He put on his patched cotton clothes and got off the bed. He limped over. When he opened the door, the cold wind blew in fiercely. It brought along snow particles and hit Uncle Luca's face. It hurt. A girl stood in the snow outside the door. The wind blew through her hair. She looked to be less than 20 years old. She wore a light white cotton clothes, a bamboo hat, and straw sandals covered with mud. The clothes were dirty, but the girl was very beautiful. Uncle Luca was a little dizzy. He even felt his breathing become rapid. This girl was really white. Her skin was like the flesh of an apple. She had shiny black hair, watery eyes, and cold lips. The girl didn't say anything. She walked into the house. Uncle Luca was stunned. He turned around and closed the door, locking it tightly. The girl still didn't say anything, but she began to take off her clothes. She took off her dirty light white cotton clothes, took off her wet clothes, and took off the bra that Luca didn't know how to describe, revealing her white skin. Luca rushed up and hugged her. She was cold, but Luca was as hot as fire. When they hugged each other, it was neither cold nor hot. The next day, Luca had a wife. However, he still didn't have a woman to talk to. That woman didn't speak. He didn't know if it was because she couldn't speak. Luca thought that she was most likely a fugitive from the war. However, now that she had an identity, she was Luca's wife. That meant that she was from the Snowfall Village. In order to let his wife live a better life, Luca, who had always been lazy, actually became diligent. After a month, the girl was pregnant. After another 10 months, the woman gave birth to a little boy. Like the woman, the boy also had snow-white skin, unlike Luca's dark skin, like the bark of a palm tree. Luca thought that he had to fix the fireplace and heat it up. He couldn't let his wife freeze after giving birth. Thus, he spent a lot of money to fix the fireplace. That day in the village, Luca felt very proud. All the villagers knew that Luca had married a beautiful wife and even gave birth to a son for him. They were envious and jealous. However, that night, when Luca opened the door, he saw that the bed beside the warm fireplace was empty. There was no one there. There was a puddle of water on the bed. Outside the house, there was neat white snow. There were only Luca's footprints on the snow. The child was crying loudly, looking for his mother. Outside, there was the endless howling of the wind. As for the girl who appeared in the snowy night, she silently disappeared into the snow and never appeared again. Who was she? Why didn't she speak? Was she a fugitive or not? Where did she go? Some people in the village said that the girl most likely ran away with another man. After all, the girl was so beautiful and Luca was so ugly. Some people said that the girl had been taken away. That day, a few soldiers in armor had sneaked into the village. Some people also said that the girl wasn't human at all. She was a snow woman, a demon beast from the mountains and snow. Her body was made of ice and snow. She melted beside the hot fireplace, leaving only a puddle of water. And Luca cried for a whole day. For a whole day. Then he stopped crying. Instead, he smiled and looked at the sleeping child in the swaddling clothes. That child was so similar to her. Don't say it. When he cried, he looked a little like Luca. An hour passed. Reynolds sat on the bed and listened to Luca's story. He sighed deeply. Chapter 304. He didn't know how to comfort Luca. He didn't expect this simple and down-and-out villager to have such a mythical experience. I miss her every day. At this moment, Luca was sobbing uncontrollably. Murky tears flowed down his cheeks. A man who looked to be in his 50s was sobbing. Anyone who saw him would feel bad. Reynolds could only comfort him. Uncle Luca, it's okay. Don't be sad. You still have your child. Isn't your child still here? Luca wiped his tears and said, My child went missing a few months ago. He's the first villager to go missing. I'm sorry. Reynolds looked at Luca awkwardly and sighed helplessly. Because he really had nothing else to say. Luca didn't mind. He looked at the ceiling and said slowly, It's okay. It's all in the past. I, Luca, have a wife and a child. God has treated me well. I can die without regrets. The house was silent for a while. Luca brought Reynolds to the village to buy some cooked food. Haha, it's rare for a guest to come to my house. Your friend Reynolds and I will go to the village to buy some cooked food. It's cold outside. Miss, you can wait at my house. Luca subconsciously treated Elena as a delicate girl and brought Renaud to the village. Reynolds stepped on the thick snow. It was as if he was strolling on the clouds. Everything was white, and it felt like a dream. After walking for about 20 minutes, Luca brought Reynolds to a house that looked like a tavern. 5 pounds of cooked meat and 1 pound of sake. There were almost no people in the village. Because of the weather, most of the young adults had left the village to run for their lives. Luca also told Reynolds that a group of Babieka's troops had come here a while ago. However, they didn't burn, kill, or loot. They might have been chased away by the weather. Reynolds smiled and said, Uncle Luca, don't worry. We're here. Luca smiled honestly. He didn't take Reynolds' words to heart. If he knew Elena's identity and strength, who knew what he would think? The snow was getting heavier and heavier. Luca looked at the sky and said, Let's go back quickly. There will be a snowstorm later. Reynolds sighed at the magical climate here and followed Luca back to the familiar little wooden house. Elena, I'm back. Reynolds trembled as he ran into the house. He quickly squatted by the fireplace and rubbed his hands as he breathed. It was too cold outside. Elena, who was sitting at the side, took off her silver armor and long boots, revealing 2 smooth and straight calves. She crossed one leg over the other, and her toes kept moving. It was both seductive and cute. Seeing Reynolds like this, he said disdainfully, I regret making you my friend now. Reynolds did not mind at all. He was already used to Elena's sarcasm. He also roughly understood that she was only harsh with her words, but she still treated him well. Just like that, The three of them sat by the fireplace and had a meal in silence. Eileen didn't hold back at all as she gobbled down large chunks of meat and gulped down large bowls of wine in one go. Although she was extremely bold and unrestrained, she still revealed an elegant temperament. It was gradually getting dark outside, or rather, in this climate, there was very little time during the day. Most of the time, it was gloomy. Luca found 2 blankets for Reynolds and Elena. The two of them slept in another small house with their backs against the fireplace. Reynolds and Elena slept on the same bed. Elena did not mind. She placed one hand behind her head and closed her eyes. It was unknown if she was asleep. It was Reynolds's first time sleeping so close to a girl. He felt that it was a little absurd. There were also some subtle emotions in his heart. During the day, after being chased by the 100-legged witch and walking a long distance, Reynolds was already tired. He finally could not help but fall asleep. After some time, Reynolds felt someone poking his waist. He opened his eyes and found that Elena had sat up. She whispered to Reynolds, "Did you hear a baby crying outside the house?" Reynolds was stunned. He listened carefully. Indeed, there was a baby crying outside the house. It seemed to be not far from the house. The crying was faintly discernible. Under the cover of the whistling cold wind, this sound could actually be heard. It was like a sound that directly penetrated the soul. It was heartbreaking and annoying. "Elena, do you want to go out and take a look?" Reynolds asked. At this moment, the room was pitch black. Elena, who was sleeping beside Reynolds, was wearing a milky white loose dress. She knelt on the bed. In Reynolds's eyes, she seemed to be emitting a holy radiance. This radiance made Elena even more sacred and seductive. Elena nodded and said, "Of course I want to go out and take a look. Reynolds, come with me." "Okay, let's go together." As he said that, Reynolds put on a thick coat and carefully put on his shoes. He got off the bed and followed behind Elena. In the room outside, Uncle Luca was sleeping soundly. His snores were deafening. Obviously, he did not hear the sound outside. Elena opened the door. Immediately, a gust of cold wind mixed with snow particles rushed in. The two closed the door and walked out. "It's so cold," Reynolds said loudly. His voice was very soft because of the snowstorm. Sure enough, there was a snowstorm outside. The snow particles were like knives as they fiercely hit Reynolds's face. Elena looked at him with disdain and said, "Cut the crap. Come with me." Reynolds was speechless. He looked at Elena's clothes. She was wearing a thin white dress and silver boots. In her hand was her weapon, Holy Radiance. What a strong physique. The baby's cries came from a forest not far away. Reynolds followed behind Elena, shivering in the cold. Could it be that some random child had wandered into the forest and gotten lost, or had encountered some danger? A child without any ability to protect himself would be frozen to death in such bad weather. Thinking of this, Reynolds was somewhat anxious. He could not help but quicken his steps. After a while, they got closer and closer. The cries got closer and closer. Reynolds heaved a sigh of relief. He knew that the child was still alive for the time being. At this moment, Elena suddenly stopped in her tracks. She used her arm to block Reynolds and said in a low voice, "Be careful." Reynolds was stunned. He quickly looked in front of him. What entered Reynolds' eyes was not a cute child, but a monster that was about 4 meters tall and 8 meters long. Its entire body was covered in rotting tumors. The cries of the baby were actually coming from this extremely disgusting monster's large mouth that was dripping with thick liquid. Chapter 305. Reynolds sucked in a breath of cold air. He subconsciously clenched his fists and asked with a trembling voice, "Eileen, what is this? The man-eating beast Mingue can make hallucinatory sound from its mouth. Its cries are very strange. Those who can hear its cries are very kind people," Eileen said with a complicated expression. Reynolds didn't know what she was thinking. The Mingue relied on this shameless method to charm the innocent and kind people. Then, it would hunt and devour them to increase its strength. The more people it ate, the faster it would increase its strength. Reynolds instantly understood why the people in the Snowfall village had disappeared. There was a high probability that they were lured by this man-eating beast and devoured. That guy called Luca was a fortune teller. If he hadn't met us, he would have been the one who disappeared tonight. Eileen said expressionlessly. Looking at the man-eating beast, Eileen snorted. She flashed and jumped in front of it, staring at it closely. The man-eating beast's cry, Ghost, opened its mouth and let out a strange cry. It sounded like a baby crying. Suddenly, it closed its bloody mouth, and its whole body was like a bolt of lightning. It quickly rushed in front of Reynolds, and a black gas immediately came out of its mouth and quickly enveloped Reynolds, who had no time to react. Reynolds! Eileen thought to herself that she had miscalculated. This guy was indeed very cunning. He knew to eliminate the weak first. The black gas enveloped Reynolds' body. Reynolds was shocked. The next moment, he discovered that the black gas didn't have any offensive power. He didn't feel anything strange either. However, Reynolds felt that his body was tightly sucked in by something. He couldn't move. Moreover, his right hand was uncontrollably sucked into the man-eating beast's mouth. The Apocalypse Bracelet. Reynolds instantly understood its goal. Sure enough, this demonic beast also had his bracelet as its target. At this moment, Reynolds didn't have time to think. With a thought, he summoned a pink lightning bolt. It quickly and fiercely descended from the sky and struck the man-eating beast. However, the man-eating beast didn't dodge. It just opened its mouth and swallowed the lightning into its stomach. Unscathed, it even licked its mouth as if it hadn't had enough. Reynolds was stunned. This was his only offensive skill. Under his all-out attack, it was unscathed. In his despair, Reynolds could only watch helplessly as his body got closer and closer to Ming Gui's disgusting mouth. He could even smell the stench that even the blizzard could not cover. He was about to vomit from the stench. At this critical moment, a small ball of holy light flew out from behind the man-eating beast. Seeing this ball of light, Ming Gui knew that it was Elena's spear, but he didn't think much of it. He opened his mouth and swallowed the ball of light, licking his lips like before. But this time, Ming Gui miscalculated. There was a price to pay for eating indiscriminately. At this moment, the huge body of the man-eating beast suddenly inflated like a balloon. The strange beast was no longer as calm as before. Its ugly face was extremely twisted, as if it was enduring incomparable pain. First, Ming Gui's eyeballs fell out of their sockets. Then, with a loud bang, Ming Gui's entire body exploded. His internal organs and intestines fell into the snow and were buried by the snowstorm in no time. "Hey, are you still alive?" Elena walked to Reynolds' side and mocked him. Reynolds looked at Elena and found that he could move. He heaved a sigh of relief, but his face was still shaken. "I'm still alive. I won't die. Thank you, Elena." Elena grabbed Reynolds' hand and looked at the bracelet. "It's confirmed now. If you don't throw this bracelet away, there will be all kinds of strange beasts and even powerful people fighting for it in the future." Reynolds was silent. "All right, go back and get warm. Look at your embarrassing appearance. I don't care if you freeze to death." After saying that, Elena ignored Reynolds and walked out of the forest. Reynolds smiled bitterly and also walked out of the forest. The two returned to Uncle Luca's house. When they opened the door, they found that Luca was still sleeping soundly. Reynolds looked at him and couldn't help but smile. Now, there shouldn't be any more missing people in the village. Elena took off her silver boots and lay down on the bed. Reynolds also took off his shoes and thick clothes before lying down beside Elena. Looking at Elena, who was so close to him, he suddenly felt like he was hallucinating. Was this the feeling of having a friend? No matter what he did, he wasn't alone. At this moment, Reynolds couldn't fall asleep. He looked at the bracelet on his right hand silently, his heart in turmoil. Why did this bracelet appear on his body? What was the world in his body? The current him was simply too weak. Although protecting himself in front of ordinary people wasn't a problem, in front of unknown strange beasts and unknown situations, he had no ability to protect himself at all. Just like today, this made Reynolds even more determined to go to the Tang Academy. However, he couldn't go now. At the very least, he had to follow Elena and search for traces of the missing people of the Kalor tribe. "Are you so scared that you can't sleep?" Elena asked softly. From the looks of it, She wasn't asleep either. When Reynolds heard that, he didn't get angry. He was already used to the way Elena talked to him. "Do you know about the Tang Academy?" Reynolds asked. She was the princess of the Babieka family, so she definitely knew about the academy. "Father wants me to go, saying I'm a natural war god." "I didn't go. It's a long journey, and I'm too lazy to travel," Elena said casually. After a short pause, she asked why. "Do you want to go there?" Reynolds grunted in response. "That's true. After all, you've awakened your innate skill, and you're too weak. It's not a bad idea to cultivate there." In the darkness, Elena seemed to be laughing. This laughter didn't sound like a joke to Reynolds. It sounded like she was teasing him. "Where are we going tomorrow?" Reynolds asked. He had no clue how to find the missing people of the Kalor tribe, so he could only follow Elena. In addition, his apocalypse bracelet was an ominous item. With Elena by his side, he would be very safe. "Let's stay here for a few days first. I'm interested in that snow woman that Luca mentioned." Elena turned over, leaving her back to Reynolds. In the darkness, in the narrow space, Elena turned around slightly, and a faint fragrance lingered in the air, entering Reynolds' nostrils. So fragrant. Reynolds' mind shook, and he also turned around, his back facing Elena. The night passed uneventfully. Chapter 306. In the next few days, Reynolds and Elena walked around the village to check on the situation and also to find the Snow Lady. Since Elena killed the man-eating beast that night, no one went missing in the village. When the two of them were bored, Elena asked Reynolds to chat with her. From the beginning, they talked about the system. Gradually, the two of them talked more and more. The combination of Chinese and Western, ancient and modern, astronomy, geography, sea, and sky. Elena was indeed the princess of the Babieka royal family. She had received an elite education since she was young. Whether it was the art of war, the strategy of governing the country, or the training of martial arts, they were all top-notch. All kinds of topics were at her fingertips. She was knowledgeable. There was no need to talk about Reynolds. After all, he was a university graduate. He knew everything and could talk about anything. He liked to surf the internet, play games, and read all kinds of nonsense. He had a lot of knowledge in his mind. Every time the two of them talked, they would talk for a long time. There were even a few times when they talked about the same topic, and there would be conflicts. For example, Elena talked about the founding history of the Babieka kingdom. The first king was so powerful and magnificent. He built the famous capital of the mainland, God Bestowment. Reynolds told her about the history of Qin Shi Huang ruling the world and building the world miracle, the Great Wall. Elena said that her country had a deep cultural heritage and had many outstanding singers and poets. Reynolds talked about the Book of Songs, the culture of the 100 schools of thought, Confucianism, Taoism, and so on. He also talked about the poems of the Tang and Song dynasties, novels of the Ming and Qing dynasties, all kinds of musical instruments, and all kinds of songs. Elena also said that everyone in her country was a soldier. Every one of them was born to fight. Reynolds said that in his world, the citizens of Russia could tear a bear apart with their bare hands. The two of them chatted like this, and the more they talked, the more they got along. What surprised Elena was that the boy named Renaud was extremely knowledgeable. His knowledge was on par with hers. No matter what she said to him, whether it was astrology, climate, philosophy, or history, he was able to answer her questions with ease. Although the two of them had different views, Elena had to admit that this Reynolds was the most knowledgeable person she had ever met in her life. Even her teacher, the famous sage of the Babieka kingdom, couldn't compare to him. After chatting for a few days, even Elena herself didn't realize that the time she spent chatting with Reynolds was getting longer and longer. Sometimes, she would even sit on the bed and chat with Reynolds face to face until dawn. This weak-looking boy was actually the happiest, most gratifying, and most congenial person he had ever met in his life. In all his life, whether it was an enemy or a friend, old or young, there had never been a person who could be so knowledgeable and chat with him about so many miscellaneous things. This person could be said to be the only confidant he had ever met in his life. Confidant. Elena was amused by her own thoughts. She was a member of the royal family of the empire. Since she was young, she had been regarded as the future of the empire. She was incomparably arrogant and looked down on everyone. In the entire empire, there were only a handful of people who could catch his eye. Not to mention people of the same age. Even if there were countless young talents in the empire, let alone friends or enemies, they didn't even have the qualifications to sit down and talk to her. But now, a weak peer of the same age was actually chatting so happily with him. This was the first time in his life. It seemed that letting Reynolds follow him was indeed an unexpected gain. On this day, Reynolds and Elena were taking a walk in the forest near Snowfall Village. The two of them had already decided to stay for another day before leaving for their next destination. The Snow Lady didn't appear again. No one knew where she went. Reynolds could only feel sorry for Uncle Luca. Every time you come out, you wear such thick clothes. It's really ugly. Reynolds chuckled and said, "It's cold." These few days of chatting with Elena had been very carefree. Reynolds hadn't chatted so happily in a long time. Today, the snowstorm had stopped and the sun had also come out. It shone brightly on the forest, making it exceptionally beautiful. Walking with you on a snowy day, if I'm not careful, my hair will turn white. Reynolds suddenly recalled this romantic phrase in his own world and couldn't help but blurt it out. It was just a casual remark, but when he turned around, Elena was stunned on the spot. When she heard this sentence, her expression was clearly a little strange. Reynolds didn't think much of it. When he saw the two of them standing under a palm tree, he suddenly felt playful and kicked the tree hard. The tree didn't move at all. Reynolds hurriedly ran away with a sneaky look on his face. Elena said disdainfully, "Humph, what a laughable strength. If it were me, I could easily—" Before he could finish his sentence, the snow covering the tree began to fall like a downpour. Elena didn't react in time and was covered by the white snow. "Ha ha!" Reynolds was already laughing so hard that his stomach hurt. Eileen's face was gloomy as she stared at Reynolds. However, to her surprise, she realized that she wasn't angry. Looking at Reynolds, who was convulsing with laughter, the corners of Eileen's mouth unconsciously curled up slightly. She said softly, "Reckless fellow, the desolate wilderness, the bustling capital city, the mysterious forest, the endless snowy mountains, and the dangerous dense forest." These were all places that Lin Ling had been to. Living in these places was like a sheep entering a tiger's den. No matter which environment it was, there were unexpected dangers. Groups of wild beasts in the wilderness, unexpected bad weather, mysterious dangers in the forest, strange and terrifying demon beasts in the snowy mountains, and all kinds of supernatural events. If Jiao Chan wasn't by her side, she really couldn't imagine what would happen to her. Xianyang City, the land of Qin Chu. In the pavilion of a family, a young girl dressed in light pink stood. Her long black hair fell over her shoulders. The snowflakes around the pavilion fluttered and floated on her hair. In a white mist, a pair of indifferent snowy eyes seemed to be peeking at the world. It had been a long time since it snowed in Xianyang City. The mysterious young girl was like snow and mist. There was a strange color in her indifferent eyes, making it hard for people to see through her. Fog lingered in the pavilion. Outside the pavilion, the green grass that should have been thriving had already withered. The withered leaves no longer showed any signs of life. The ground was dry and cracked, and the flowers were emotionless. They were like corpses that had been deprived of life. A deathly silence enveloped the pavilion. This family has been cursed by the demonic masters. She stood up and took out a pink folding fan from her bosom. Chapter 307. This fan was not an ordinary item. It was an exorcism treasure passed down from the Flower Burial Valley. When the fan was spread out, it would disperse the curse in the air. Lisa carefully waved the fan in the air slowly and slowly walked out of the pavilion. It had been more than a month since she came to this world and followed Yao Chan for more than a month. Of course, there was a change. Lisa felt that she had become accustomed to life here. Clothing, food, shelter, and transportation, no matter which one it was, Lisa felt that her life was very exquisite, very fulfilling, and very dreamy. although occasionally she would miss her family, miss the earth, miss the boy named Reynolds. Tang Academy, Renault. Will you go there? Lisa muttered to herself and looked at the gray sky. Even on a snowy day, Xianyang City was still very lively. It was worthy of being the largest city in the Qin Kingdom. The streets were like a market, with many hawkers on both sides, selling all kinds of goods. People were also shuttling back and forth, either in a hurry or stopping. Although the western part of the continent was very unstable and chaotic due to war, many of the natives of the western region had fled here in order to survive the war. The western part of the continent was very peaceful. But in this place, this powerful country, there was no turmoil of war at all. People only knew that there was a war in the far west, but it had no impact here. This was the capital of a strong country. A country must be strong to have the capital, to have a foothold. However, although the country was prosperous and the people were at peace, there were still discordant voices. Lisa was in a shop selling silk. She was choosing her favorite color while waiting for Diao Chan's orders. The person selling silk was a delicate-looking girl who looked to be 14 or 15 years old. She was in the prime of her youth and was very cute. Her body had also begun to develop and become very beautiful. At this time, there was a burst of noise from the door of the shop. "Qianyu, I'm here again." "Ha ha ha. Did you miss your brother?" A man who was dressed gorgeously but looked very pompous walked in, followed by two people who looked like lackeys. This lineup, at first glance, was like a side character in a web novel and would not live past a chapter. Lisa frowned, glanced at the three people, and ignored them. There was no fear in her heart, and she even wanted to beat them up to get rid of evil for the people. After staying by Diao Chan's side for a long time, one's temperament would change greatly. When faced with a situation, he could become unperturbed, or he could do as he pleased. The young lady called Qianyu's expression changed as she said in a low voice, "Young Master Morong, please don't make fun of me." Lisa looked at Qianyu and secretly thought that this should be the kind of plot where a rich young master harasses a virtuous little girl. At this time, she was also quite interested in watching the show. In his own world, if he wanted to see this kind of plot, he would only see it in novels or movies. Today, it was rare for him to see it in real life. This young Master Morong didn't seem to understand human language. When he saw Qianyu's reaction, his face bloomed with joy. He said happily, "Ha ha, little sister Qianyu, don't be shy. Big brother is very gentle." As he spoke, he reached out to touch her face. "Quick, let me touch you. I missed you so much." Qianyu was still young and had never met such a powerful scoundrel. Today, the owner of the shop was not here, so he found the opportunity. At this moment, seeing his hand reaching towards her, Qianyu was about to cry. Lisa sighed at the side and said, "Stop." Young Master Morong was stunned and looked at Lisa. He wanted to get angry, but after seeing Lisa's appearance, he instantly smiled and said, "This lady, you really look like the snow outside, incomparably holy. You are the most beautiful, most adorable, and most elegant woman I have ever seen. Let's be friends. Get lost." Lisa didn't even look at him and directly said this word. Young Master Morong's expression changed. His expression was as if he had eaten shit. He was the only son of a vice city lord of Xianyang City. He was used to being arrogant and despotic. When had he ever met such an ignorant woman? "Bitch, don't be shameless when I give you face. Usually there are countless women who want to fight to get into my bed." Young Master Morong slapped towards Lisa. Qianyu, who was at the side, exclaimed. The customers at the side all retreated far away, afraid that they would be implicated if young Master Morong was unhappy. A cold light flashed past. Poochie, blood spurted out like a fountain. Young Master Morong's head was cut off by Lisa. His eyes were wide open. Even if he died, he couldn't understand how he died. With a plop, Morong's body fell to the ground due to inertia. A deathly silence. The surrounding people were dumbfounded. They were all shocked and scared speechless. Young Master Morong was killed. It was unknown who shouted, but in an instant, all the people in the surroundings became noisy and crowded around the store to watch the show. Some people were overjoyed, some people looked at Lisa with pity, and some people secretly left the place, Lisa frowned, and a trace of regret flashed past her heart. She was a little impulsive. It seemed that the person she killed was not a small figure. Snowfall Village. This day, as usual, was a snowstorm night. But there was something different. It could be said to be a huge change. Something that made people tremble with fear happened. The endless snowstorm destroyed the only remaining life force in the area, like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. More than half of the houses in the village were covered by endless snow. Snowfall Village was buried alive under the heavy snow. This was in Reno, a week after Elena had stayed there. The weather was changing. A disaster was coming. Before leaving, Uncle Luca knelt in the snow in despair. Tears flowed down his face. She still didn't come back. She still left. She didn't come back to see me. Why? Renaud patted Luca's shoulder and sighed. He didn't know what to say. Elena glanced at him and said, "Hey, do you still want to continue living here? This house of yours will be swallowed by the snow sooner or later." The environment was harsh, the terrain was remote, and there was almost no contact with the outside world. It was not surprising that a village like this would quietly disappear at some point in time without warning. Of course, Uncle Luca knew the fate of this village, but he still had a fantasy in his heart. This fantasy urged him to hand over his life here. He would never know why that mysterious snow maiden would come to his home, why she slept with him, why she had a child with him. Where did that child go? Uncle Luca didn't know. Renaud didn't know either. Chapter 308. Oh, fate! We've escaped the terrifying curse. Who would have thought that even the village would be destroyed? Uncle Luca knelt in the snow sadly and muttered to himself. It was too sudden, just like a dream. These few days, Reynolds and Eileen talked about everything under the sun. When they were tired, they would go to the only tavern in the village to buy some meat and return to Luca's house. The three of them would eat together. Every day, Uncle Luca would tell Reynolds and Eileen the story of his wife, Snow Lady. That seemed to be the happiest time in Uncle Luca's life, and the only happy time he had every day. Reynolds listened quietly. Sometimes, he would empathize with Luca and comfort him. As for Eileen, after she finished eating, she would go to the bed in the back room, cover herself with a blanket, and sleep. Luca was also getting old. After chatting with Reynolds for a while after the meal, he could not resist the fatigue and went to bed. Therefore, Reynolds also went to the back room in the dark and went to bed, lying beside Eileen. Sometimes, Reynolds would think that all of this was simply unimaginable. A goddess like Eileen was lying on the same bed with him without any taboo? Or was it that she was simply not interested in the feelings between men and women? Reynolds would not think too much about it, because this place was simply too cold. Even if the bed was behind the fireplace, Reynolds would still wake up from the cold several times. On the other hand, Eileen would either not speak for the whole night, or she would pull the sleepy Reynolds up and chat with him for a long time. These days, Reynolds actually felt happy and harmonious. Sleeping on the same bed with Eileen every day, although nothing happened, it still made Reynolds feel at ease, and a warm current flowed from the bottom of his heart. "Uncle Luca, thank you for your hospitality these few days." Reynolds sighed and took out a few gold coins from his bosom. These were the coins that Giao Chan gave him in the country of Black Sand. Through this 1 month in the king's realm, Reynolds had a rough understanding of the currency conversion here. 1 gold coin could let an ordinary family live for a month without worrying about food and clothing. Luca did not take it. He looked at Renaud, then looked at Elena. He sighed and said, "The two of you, in the remaining days of my life, being able to meet the two of you has added some joy to my lifeless life. I'm very..." Before he could finish his sentence, 2 drops of tears fell uncontrollably from his eyes. "I'm very happy." Luca lay on the ground, burying his head deep into the snow, his body trembling uncontrollably. Once Reynolds and the other 2 left, Luca would once again fall into loneliness. "What do you think the Snow Lady is?" Renaud asked. Elena, who was beside him, remained silent. She didn't seem to be interested in this at all. Judging from her appearance, she had been thinking about something for the past few days. The two of them were already very far away from the snowfall village. According to the map, the two of them only needed to walk for another day to reach the forest of day and dark night on the continent. The forest of day and night was unparalleled in the world. As the name implied, this forest was a place where the night never ended. The inhabitants of this place were all beautiful elves. Dark elves, fire elves, water elves, floral elves. This forest was extremely large and had a vast territory. It was the second largest country in the western region after the Babika country, the Elven Kingdom. The Elven Kingdom. After listening to Elena's introduction, Renaud sighed. This world was really colorful and mysterious. Moreover, Renaud suddenly couldn't wait to see these elves. Those elves are all extremely beautiful. Ordinary people can't see them at all. Elena looked at Renaud's reaction and said, "Even in my country, there are only 2 or 3 families with elves, and they are the supreme royal families. The Elven Kingdom has a very strict law. The elves are not allowed to go out, and they are not allowed to let outsiders step into their territory." Renaud asked curiously, "Then why do the people in your country have elves?" Elena said, "There are countless animal traffickers and hunters in this world. After they enter, they find lone elves and control them, stun them, and then sell them to the royal families in the empire." Renaud said angrily, "These are human, elven traffickers, right?" Elena smiled and said, "That's a good way of putting it. Elven traffickers. The elves are naturally handsome, and those with power and influence all covet their beauty. They do everything they can to get them." Along the way, since the two of them left the snowfall village, the weather had become warm. There was no snow, and the journey was sunny. Although the surrounding environment had rugged mountain roads, fragrant grasslands, and occasional showers. All of this relieved and healed Renaud's heart. Elena led the unicorn and walked in front without saying a word. Renaud did not notice her expression. He was looking at the map. If we walk like this, it will take a lot of time to reach the day and night forest. Renaud looked at Elena and asked curiously, "Elena, I've always been curious. What do you want to do after escaping from your country? Aren't you going back?" Elena looked back at Renaud and asked, "Do you think I'm really a kind person?" The forest was supposed to be filled with endless darkness during the day and at night. However, on every tree, there were gems emitting gentle white light, bringing a trace of light to this dark forest. "Save me, save me." On an empty patch of grass, a petite and cute girl was sitting on the ground, crying with tears streaming down her cheeks. Under the illumination of the Holy Spirit stones on every tree, this girl's situation seemed even more desperate. Upon closer inspection, this girl's right foot was caught by a beast trap. Her smooth calf was bleeding. It looked like her calf was also crooked at a strange angle. It looked like it was fractured. What is this? Why is there such a thing in the forest? The girl cried in despair as she rubbed her ankle. It was obviously painful. We're almost at the end of the forest. I shouldn't have sulked with my brother and run away from home. Sob, sob, sob. The girl had long ocean blue hair that reached her shoulders. She looked cute and could even be described as exquisite. Her ears were pointed, and there were 2 snow-white wings on her back. She was obviously not human. She wore clothes woven from leaves, revealing her cute navel. She only wore a grass skirt, revealing her snow-white and alluring legs. The girl tried hard to sit up and looked at the faint light in the distance. She knew where she was at the edge of the day and night forest. "I have to go back quickly. It's so scary here." The girl struggled to get up and obviously did not notice a man suddenly appeared behind her. Chapter 309. As expected of an elf. She looked so pure and holy. She can be sold for a good price now. This man had a fat head and big ears. He was burly and had a fierce face. He was only wearing a shirt, and his bulging muscles could be clearly seen. He held a black bag in his left hand and a short knife in his right. He was looking at the girl with a strange gaze. The girl was shocked and screamed. She looked at the man and kept retreating. She asked in horror, "Who are you?" The man's greasy mouth revealed a disgusting smile. He said, "My little baby, I'm the one who will bring you home." He After saying that, he swung the knife down and chopped off the girl's wings. He bent his hand and chopped off her wings. He was merciless. The girl could not dodge in time and was hit directly. Her wings were chopped off and she fell on the grass. Blood flowed from her back and dyed the grass red. It hurts. It hurts. Brother, save me. Brother. The girl screamed and lay on the ground. Her tears had dried up and she screamed in despair. She had never experienced such pain. It was a miracle that she did not faint at this moment. Although the price of chopping off your wings will be lower, it's still much lower than running away. Little baby, I'll bring you home now. After saying that, he put the black bag on the girl's body. He ignored her screams and struggles and put her in. In a moment, this person disappeared on the spot, leaving behind a trail of blood. On the other side, Reynolds and Eileen were still walking slowly. They chatted and looked at the scenery along the way. Reynolds, answer me. Eileen stopped and looked at Reynolds. For the first time, her expression showed that she was deep in thought and lost. It was the first time Reynolds saw such an expression on her face. What a kind person. I hope that you'll answer my question as a friend. Reynolds looked at Eileen's serious expression and could not help but smile. He said, Of course you're a kind person. You're my friend. Eileen looked at Reynolds in surprise. She did not expect him to give her an answer without hesitation. You're not lying to me, right? Elena looked into Reynolds' eyes and asked again. Reynolds stopped smiling and replied with the same seriousness. I swear I didn't lie to you. Elena, you're really kind. I killed my own father. I've killed many, many people. I want to find an answer. Even so, you still think I'm kind? Reynolds still didn't hesitate and said, That's right. I think you're very kind. I've been very happy with you these past few days. Elena looked at Reynolds' eyes again and found that his eyes were not evasive and were very clear. Even when they slept on the same bed in the Snowfall Village, he did not do anything offensive to her. Moreover, he was so knowledgeable that he could be said to be his confidant. Elena revealed a rare smile and said, Reynolds, you're really strange. You actually think that I'm kind. Reynolds also smiled and said, I'm just telling the truth. Elena was silent for a moment and said, My previous plan was to travel around and find the answer in my heart. After that, I'll return to my Babika empire. Reynolds asked, How is it? Have you found the answer? Elena smiled and said, Why don't you ask me what kind of answer I'm looking for? Because it's not important. What's important is to find a reasonable home for my soul that has no place to go. Reynolds answered. Elena was shocked and then felt relieved. She looked at Reynolds and said, Yes, it's reasonable that you can understand my thoughts. At this time, Elena turned over and rode on the back of the unicorn. She pulled Reynolds up with one hand. Reynolds was suddenly pulled by her and did not know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, What's wrong? Where are we going? Elena said, I think I'm about to find the answer. We're going to the day and night forest. By the way, Reynolds, I'll show you how powerful the talent of swift wind is. Reynolds did not react and just sat down. At this moment, in an instant, the unicorn was like an arrow released from a bow. With a whoosh, it rushed out from where it was. F***CK. At such a fast speed, the scenery on both sides flashed by quickly. Reynolds' tears were almost blown out by the wind. Elena laughed behind Reynolds and said, Reynolds, my good friend, sit in front of me and block the wind for me, haha. 2 people and 1 beast flew on the road like this. They advanced towards the day and night forest. In a small village, in the big banyan tree hole, there lived a little bear. He was ugly, dirty, and smelly. These did not matter. He just needed to wash. More importantly, the people in the village said that this little bear was not an ordinary bear. He was actually a monster. No one knew when he settled here, and no one was willing to go near him. But the little bear never said anything. He had a cloth bag filled with seeds. What he did every day was go to the mountains to find fruits to eat and go to the stream to drink water. The rest of the time, he would plant his seeds in the soil. When he was tired, he would curl up in the tree hole and sleep for a while. When he woke up, he would plant the seeds again. Actually, the little bear was just an ordinary little bear. He did not know why he could speak. When the little bear picked up the bag, someone told him that there was a monster seed in the bag. As long as he planted it, a person would appear. This person would be able to fulfill a wish of the person who made the wish. What should he wish for? Should he destroy this village that hated him? Should he let those who bullied him die? Or should he just destroy this world that did not have a trace of warmth? The little bear thought about many things. Finally, he thought of a wish that he felt would make him the happiest. So he planted the seeds day and night, trying to lure that person out. Finally, the little bear found him one day. It was a beautiful night. The stars were like thousands of pieces of gold, spreading across the boundless night sky. The little bear saw a petite and cute girl with long red ponytails. Looks like a big guy accidentally came over. All right, think about what you wish for. The girl's voice was crisp and clear, echoing between the mountains. I have. Tell me, what do you wish for? Even if it means destroying the world, I can do it for you. The girl said. Chapter 3:10. Please give me a hug. Little Bear was still a little cautious, but soon he became excited. It's that kind of gentle, soft, and comfortable action when you wrap your arms around a person's body. I heard that it's called a hug, right? His eyes were sparkling, and happiness spread across his face. He said, I don't want to destroy the world. Please give me a hug. Swift wind. For Reynolds, this skill was simply taking his life. The oncoming wind was indeed swift wind. It blew Reynolds' cheeks until they hurt, and tears kept flowing out. Eileen, stop. Eileen, I'm going to die. Eileen may have found her conscience. After using swift wind to carry the unicorn and Reynolds forward, after more than an hour, they finally stopped. Reynolds seemed to be dying. He slid down from a unicorn and lay on the ground, panting, looking at Eileen, who was riding the unicorn as if nothing had happened. Eileen was like a little girl who had secretly done something bad. She looked at Reynolds and said, Ha, look at you. You're so cute. Reynolds touched his hair and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Under the guidance of the wind, his hair was now styled extremely chic, like a super scion standing upright in the air. This is the border of the eternal night forest. As long as you enter this border, you will see the eternal night forest and the eternal night. Eileen said. Reynolds took out the map and found that the eternal night forest territory was vast. In the western region, it was only a little smaller than the Babika Kingdom and could be regarded as the second largest country. It was worth mentioning that after passing through the eternal night forest, it was the frozen forbidden area. In the forbidden area, there were endless ice storms, and the weather was extremely bad. Humans simply couldn't survive in it. In it, there were countless monsters, strange beasts. What Reynolds cared about was that as long as he passed through this forest, this forbidden area, he could go to the first eastern country, Qin. Qin was the most profound and mysterious country with a long history. In terms of history, Qin was the most ancient country in the King's world. Even the powerful Tang dynasty couldn't compare. What are you thinking about? Eileen asked when she saw that Reynolds was silent. Reynolds shook his head and said, I'm thinking if I'll be in danger if I go to the Tang Academy alone. Eileen pondered for a moment and snorted coldly. She mocked, that's right. At that time, without my protection, you'll be in grave danger. He seemed to have thought of something and said, also, there will definitely be other people who will come to snatch the bracelet on your hand. Renaud nodded and remained silent. He looked at Elena and asked, when will you return to your country? How do you want to find the answer? I don't know. Let's leave it to fate. Eileen said in a carefree manner. Moreover, the Babika Empire today doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. They're even expanding their territory towards the mainland and constantly invading the surrounding areas. What's the point of me going back? At this point, the two chatted as they walked into the eternal night forest. The night in the everlasting dark forest was too quiet. The sound of the wind and the chirping of the insects seemed to have disappeared. Only the cries of the birds could be heard from time to time, and the empty air filled with the smell of blood. It seemed to be the last struggle of life, and also seemed to be a cry for help before death. The dark clouds covered the moon and were in the final stage of brewing. The whole earth was shrouded in darkness. The original threatening forest was also soaked in the light of death. It seemed so dispirited and powerless. In the night sky, a ray of light shot through the dense withered branches and withered leaves on the trees, reflected in the pupils of a bird. Then, the dark clouds slowly began to withdraw from the sky, revealing the moon bit by bit, tugging at one's heart. That moon was red, the red color of blood. The Holy Spirit stone was extinguished. It was time for the Holy Spirit stone on every tree to close. In other words, it was the so-called night in the eternal night forest. A sound came. In the dense dark forest, a pair of blue eyes suddenly lit up. In the dense dark night, it was particularly horrifying. It was a pair of eyes full of killing intent and hatred. It was staring at the wind and grass in the forest. Is this the eternal night forest? After crossing the border, Reynolds saw a large expanse of ethereal black fog in front of him. Under the fog was a forest. Yes, this is the eternal night forest, the kingdom of the elves. Elena looked and said, "It should be the elves' resting time now. Let's go in quietly. Don't be discovered by the elven guards." "Why do we look like thieves?" Reynolds complained. "Stop talking nonsense. Come with me. I've always wanted to see what the eternal night forest looks like." Elena led the unicorn into the forest of eternal night. Reynolds followed her in. After entering, Reynolds was shocked by the scene in front of him. What a beautiful place. The Holy Spirit stone on every tree emitted a faint light, illuminating any corner of the forest. The warm golden light reminded Reynolds of his time on Earth. He and his roommates strolled in the night market, ate at the food stalls, drank beer, and ate skewers. It was a wonderful feeling. This is so good. This world. Reynolds couldn't help but say. At this moment, Elena suddenly covered his mouth and said helplessly, "Don't talk." Reynolds reacted. "I'm sorry." Elena let go of her hand and looked forward. "Don't hide. Show yourself." As soon as she said that, a group of elves with wings gathered from all directions. Soon, they surrounded Reynolds and Elena. "Elena, what's going on?" Reynolds looked at the elves who suddenly appeared in surprise. He was shocked. Every elf here was incomparably handsome. The leading elf stood out. His hair was light blue and fluttered in the wind. Strange flowers twined around his hair, making him look particularly enchanting. His dark blue eyes were like the deep sea, mesmerizing. His pointed ears peeked out from his hair. He was incomparably handsome. His face was white and shiny. His eyelashes were longer and denser than anyone else's. His lips were thin and rosy, like the seductive cherry blossoms. At this moment, standing under the Holy Spirit stone tree, he was like a star in the night sky. Chapter 3:11. I'm looking for my sister. She's gone. His tone was filled with hatred and murderous intent, as if he was suppressing his anger. The moment he said that, all the elves were enraged. Their handsome faces were filled with murderous intent. Elena said, "How would I know where your sister is? I just want to come in and see what the eternal night forest is like." After a pause, Elena felt that her words were inappropriate. After all, she had violated the rules and came to the eternal night forest. She thought for a moment and added, "We'll leave here immediately." With that, she prepared to leave with Reynolds. "Take them down." At this moment, the leader of the elves ordered. The other elves blocked Reynolds and Elena's way out instantly. Elena's expression changed. She held her spear, Holy Glory, in front of her and looked at them coldly. "You want to block my way? How dare you?" Reynolds did not know whether to leave or stay. He looked at Elena and said anxiously, "Hey, are you confident you can win against them?" At this moment, a ball of holy light in Elena's hand enveloped Reynolds. She said, "Don't meddle. Stay in this shield, and they won't be able to hurt you." Reynolds's vision blurred. The next moment, he found himself surrounded by a round shield of light. He touched it with his hand. It was warm, but extremely hard. Night's spirit frowned at the side. At his command, all the elves flew towards Eileen. The weapons of these elves were dazzling hunter blossoms. Most of them were beautiful bows and arrows. They aimed slightly in the air, and an arrow faintly appeared, knocked on the bow. Some elves used daggers. At this moment, they attacked Elena like a gust of wind. Elena stood still and waited for the elves to swarm around her. Then, she used her holy radiance to sweep across. Whoosh, starting from Eileen, a powerful aura that was as strong as a mountain began to emanate from her body. Bang! These elves were like fallen leaves blown by the wind. They were all sent flying by Elena. Elena was protected by a ball of dazzling light. Her spear was stabbed into the ground. She exuded the aura of a king. She was like a war god. Reynolds was relieved when he saw this. It seemed like Elena was much stronger than he had imagined. The elves who had been sent flying were scattered all over the ground, and they looked at Elena with astonishment on their faces. When Night Spirit saw that, his expression darkened. Drawing a saber that shone with a dark blue glow, he pointed it at Eileen and said, "I'll punish you." After saying that, he turned into a ray of blue light and shot towards Elena. "Is this a water-type magic unique to the elves?" Elena mumbled to herself as she placed her spear in front of her. Ding-dang. As though she had predicted this, Eileen blocked Night Spirit's attack. In an instant, the ground beneath Eileen's feet caved in due to Night Spirit's powerful strength. Even Elena was slightly moved by the strength of the blow. The two of them were locked in a stalemate. The long spear and the blue long saber intertwined, emitting an intense aura. Withering ice crystal, Night Spirit let out a loud roar, and a faint blue energy flowed out of his body to the ground. Without any warning, a gust of cold air rose from the pit where the two of them were in and attacked Eileen. Sensing the danger, Elena squatted down slightly and gathered her strength. Her body shone with a holy light as she swept her right arm forcefully. With that, she blocked Night Spirit's attack. Night Spirit was shocked and was pushed back dozens of meters by Elena, looking wretched. As for Elena, she had also jumped out of the range of Night Spirit's cold air currents because she had gathered her strength. Barefooted, Elena stood at the side and glanced at the pit. She realized that the pit was filled with ice crystals. Her long boots were frozen in the pit. Thankfully, she had abandoned her silver combat boots. Otherwise, the cold air current would have invaded her entire body through her legs and turned her into an ice sculpture. "You're strong." Night Spirit looked at Elena and sighed. Elena ignored him. At that moment, the two of them retreated to the side and stared at each other. Renaud watched anxiously from within the shield, but could not do anything. At that moment, Night Spirit put away his saber and turned around with his back facing Elena. "What are you doing?" Elena asked. Night Spirit did not say anything. He picked up something from a distance and walked slowly to Elena. Even Eileen couldn't help but feel sorry for Linley after seeing it. At that moment, Night Spirit's expression was filled with hatred and sorrow. "These are the wings of my sister, Yihan. She was chopped down alive by the elf seller who was sliced into pieces." Night Spirit was almost roaring that sentence. That pair of wings was initially snow white and pure, but now they were stained with a large amount of blood. One could imagine how much pain the owner of the wings had suffered. All the elves were filled with hatred when they saw that. The elves and humans have coexisted peacefully for tens of thousands of years. Why do humans been so savage and cruel in recent years? Night Spirit growled softly. Elena was silent. Hesitating for a moment, she said, "I can only say that we've never seen your sister. I've heard about those elf traffickers who would do anything for money. Not only do they sell elves, they also sell humans and slaves. It's abominable." Night Spirit gradually calmed down and looked at Elena. "I don't want to fight with you. Looking at your moves and strength, I admit that I'm not your match. Furthermore, you're not the one who kidnapped my sister." Night Spirit sighed and looked at the Holy Spirit stone on the tree that was emitting a faint light before dismissing the elves. The rules of the elven race state that elves who reside here are not allowed to leave the Eternal Night Forest. "You can leave now. Leave this place, and I'll pretend that nothing happened." Before long, all the elves gradually disappeared from Renaud and Elena's sights. In the Eternal Night Forest, the Holy Spirit stone on the tree lit up once more. "Are we going to let it go just like that?" Renaud looked at Elena. The light of the Holy Spirit stone shone on her face, making her look exceptionally alluring. What do you mean by let it go? Renaud sighed. Aren't we going to help that elf find his sister? Elena glanced at Renaud and shook her head without saying anything. Sigh, don't sigh. That elf must have suffered unimaginable pain. What has that got to do with you? I have a feeling that once we find that elf's sister, the answer you're looking for will appear. Chapter 312. Hearing Renaud's words, Elena suddenly burst out laughing. You're such a strange person. Then, she ignored Renaud and walked deeper into the forest. Hurry up and follow me. Otherwise, you won't be able to catch up with them. When Reynolds heard this, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he followed. The little fox had been practicing magic for a long time. She could finally transform into a human. However, she never turned into a human or provoked anyone. She just stayed in her cave obediently. There was a sign at the entrance of the cave that said there was a fox in the cave. Many people came in to take a look and said that they had never seen such a beautiful, obedient fox that didn't bite. However, she always showed her teeth and chased them away. After staying in the dark for a long time, her fur was no longer shiny and her eyes were no longer as bright. If one day someone came in step by step with a blazing torch, squatted down and touched her head and said, "Are you cold?" At that time, it would be him. She could bury her head in his arms and go home. Something happened to Renaud. I hadn't seen him the past few months. Every time I heard my friends talk about Renaud, they would say that he was distracted and his eyes were unfocused. His mother thought that he was bewitched when he took the train home by himself. He said that he saw the fate roulette in the future. So, she invited a Taoist priest home to perform a ritual, but it didn't work. Renaud was my best friend, but I was so busy with my studies that I didn't have time to visit him. When I finished dealing with everything and found time to visit him during the summer vacation, it was already a few months later. I entered the house and saw Renaud sitting on his balcony, staring blankly out the window. I walked behind him and he turned to look at me. When he saw me, he was happy and his body trembled. Renaud, what's wrong? He didn't speak and looked out the window again. My heart ached. He was such a nice guy, but he was gone. After a while, I sighed and was about to leave when Renaud suddenly spoke. It's fake. It's all fake. What? Earth is about to be destroyed. Why would you say that? Life has no meaning. Are you bewitched? I'm done for. This brat seems to be possessed. I exhaled. I slapped him across the face. Why did you hit me? I thought you were possessed. So, I helped you exorcise it. I'm not possessed. I'm just slapped. F***ck your mother. Looks like you've really recovered. I sat across from Renaud, who was rubbing his face. To avoid his anger, I quickly changed the subject. What's wrong with you? Reynolds sighed and began to speak tirelessly. The story started when Reynolds returned home. Reynolds liked to climb mountains alone in the wild. Last time, he got lost in the mountains and came to a cliff. There was a small wooden house on the cliff, and a beautiful girl was sitting on the cliff and looking into the distance. She was not afraid of falling. Aren't you afraid of falling? So what if I fall? The beautiful girl stood up and welcomed Reynolds into the cabin by the cliff. She poured a cup of cola for Reynolds. You'll die if you fall. So what if we die? Our lives are meaningless to begin with. Religious extremists? Reynolds was curious. How so? The beautiful girl said slowly. Have you seen The Truman Show? Reynolds nodded. This movie was very popular, and he had seen a long time ago. Truman was the main character of a popular soap opera. Everything around him was fake. His family and friends were all actors, but he knew nothing about it. Our world is just like The Truman Show, but our situation is worse than The Truman Show. The Truman Show can escape, but we can't. Reynolds couldn't help but laugh. This beautiful girl must have gone crazy from watching the movie. If our world is The Truman Show, then who is the main character? Am I the main character? The entire Earth is the main character. What do you mean? The beautiful girl ignored Reynolds' question and asked him, do you know about the Fermi paradox? Reynolds shook his head. The shocking age of the universe and the huge number of celestial bodies mean that extraterrestrial life should be widespread. Theoretically, humans can use 1 million years to fly to various planets in the Milky Way. Then, if there are really aliens, as long as they evolved 1 million years earlier than humans, they should have arrived on Earth by now. It seemed to make sense. Reynolds nodded and took a sip of Coke. What does this have to do with what you just said about us being the main character of the Truman Show? We haven't seen any aliens until now because the Fermi paradox is correct. There is no life other than the Earth. Reynolds took a deep breath and asked the beautiful girl, "Why?" "Because the model of the universe won't give birth to life on its own. Then why is there life on Earth?" The beautiful girl looked at Reynolds with a meaningful gaze and continued, "That's right. Because it's not a coincidence that there is life on Earth." "Then what is it?" "It's man-made. The reason why there is life on Earth is because someone is interfering. The universe is a model they created. It should be a place without life. It's because someone interfered with Earth that Earth gave birth to life." The beautiful girl paused for a moment and continued. "So Earth is like the Truman Show, and the other planets are like actors around the Truman Show. The meaning of their existence is just to deceive." Clang! The cup fell to the ground. "Ridiculous. I don't believe it." "It's normal that you don't believe it, just like the Sagittarius hypothesis." "What is the Sagittarius hypothesis?" The Sagittarius hypothesis. There's a sharpshooter who punches a hole every 10 centimeters on a target. Imagine that there was a kind of two-dimensional intelligent creature living on the plane of the target. After the scientists among them observed their own universe, they discovered a great law. Every 10 centimeters in the universe, there must be a hole. They regarded the random behavior of the sharpshooter as the iron law of their own universe. It's the same reason as the Sagittarius hypothesis. This paragraph quotes the theory of the novel, The Three-Body Problem. Therefore, you believe that there is life on Earth because there happens to be water, an atmosphere, and the necessary carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and other elements to constitute life. There is also a moderate surface temperature. These factors are related to each other, affect each other, and exist for a long time, allowing life to have a relatively stable process of occurrence, development, and evolution. It's not because of man-made interference that life is born." Reynolds sneered. Chapter 3:13. When the patrolling knights entered Ice Peak Fortress, Reem became the highest commander here. Although it was unreasonable for him to send people to destroy the Griffins, there was no problem with the rules and laws. If Giles was still in Ice Peak Fortress, or if Gally hadn't been injured while picking the giant fruit, then Kipling wouldn't have such a big opinion. But no matter how big his opinion was, the official order had already been signed by Reem, Gary Quasi-Patroller, and the matter could not be changed. The official order, the mission execution pass, the action atonement voucher, these are all present. There is no way to find any problems with him in the procedures. Old man, even if there is a solution, it won't take effect immediately. Looking at their posture, they must leave the fortress tomorrow and go into the mountains to find that damned griffin. Gally looked down at his injured arm and pulled out a dagger with a swish. He cut off the bandage and removed the splint. From the elbow to the fingertips, the broken forearm was still swollen and couldn't bear any force. "I won't say those empty words. I know very well that you must go into the mountains with them. Sigh, if my old bones could still be used, I would go into the mountains too. I would leave an empty fortress to those guys." Kipling sighed and lifted Gally's arm with both hands to look at it carefully. "I will prepare the last troll potion for you as a last resort. Remember, we are not the giant bear sect. The troll potion will have huge side effects on you. If it is light, your arm will be deformed, and if it is heavy, you will die. I don't need you to tell me. I know everything I need to know. I can't do this kind of thing. Old man, you should go and see those young people." Gally tried to move his arm, then walked away with a frown. Of the 4 young people, Tron had experience in carrying out missions alone, so he would definitely go. Renault also said that he would definitely go. He wasn't blind. Reem's enmity was almost carved on his face, and the whole thing was basically Reem's revenge on Renault. How could he just stand by and watch? In fact, Renault really wanted to go himself and leave the others in the safety of the fortress. but he didn't have any reason to persuade others. Woolmama said that he would go. He was very confident that he wouldn't cause trouble and would definitely obey Tron's instructions. Baintor Lostin had indeed hesitated for a while, but in the end, he decided to go with them. He did not know if it was because he was worried that something would happen to his friends, or because he was worried that he would be estranged from his friends. At least I can carry things and prepare meals for you. I've memorized all the recipes. The shelf life of dry rations was only about 10 days. It was very likely that they would have to stay in the mountains for longer than that. Moreover, if a person had to carry 10 days' worth of rations, it would be a huge burden. Therefore, it was still necessary to have the ability to resupply in the wild. At least among the 4 youths, Turistan was the most trustworthy in this regard. Tron was the only one among the 4 who had been on a mission before, so everyone listened to him first. Cliff griffins are not easy to deal with, especially those that are bent on revenge against humans. We have to work together, use our brains, and fight together to complete this mission. I'll go to the library later and look for information on the cliff griffins again to see if there's any way to deal with them. Which Marma, you will check the weapons and equipment. Tulistan, you will prepare the daily necessities. Renaud, do you have any ideas? I'll read with you. Maybe I can think of something. I've never been on a mission before, so you lead the team, and I'll follow. Age was not a weapon. There was no way to defeat the enemy. Only professionalism could. It's very dangerous this time. Griffins, you've all seen them. Don't underestimate the strength of griffins. The one we saw was killed with the help of a sneak attack, the heavy crossbows on the city walls, Lord Giles's own blade, and the unexpected help of the alchemy flame that burned off its feathers. We don't have any of the above advantages this time. Maybe we can sneak attack. A vague idea came to Renaud's mind. After carefully thinking about it in his mind, he said, "The griffins outside are eager for revenge. Don't we still have the jerky of the previous griffins? Is there any way to make the smell in the jerky stronger again? Griffins have a good sense of smell, I remember. Maybe a trap will work. We can even do it near the fortress. Then we can use the heavy crossbows." That's right. Turistan became excited. Lure the griffins here, set a trap, and then use the crossbows. This sounds like a good plan. Tron thought carefully, but shook his head under Ben's expectant gaze. The sky near the fortress is too vast. If the heavy crossbows don't hit, then the griffins will only attack by air. Lord Giles isn't here, so we can only rely on luck if we want to hit the griffins with the crossbows. Only one kind of terrain can eliminate the threat of the griffins flying, so they can only crawl and fight hand-to-hand. You all know that it has to be a forest. If we want to kill the griffins, we can leave the empty fortress and go to the forest in the valley. The chances of success are higher. He glanced at Turistan and added, "Also, we'll be safer in the forest." Renaud couldn't think of a reason to refute with absolute certainty, so he chose to believe in professionalism at this time. So, meat jerky as bait is feasible? Of course, what you said is absolutely a good idea. Usually, when we want to lure the griffins foraging for food, we use bait. A sheep bleed, stuffed with herbs that emit a certain pungent smell, then hide and wait for the griffins to fall into the trap. This time, the griffins aren't foraging for food, but for revenge. But if we change the bait, the other tactics can be similar. I have an idea, Mama suggested. That damn griffin skin was partially burned, but there's still a lot left. We might be able to use it this time. Also, we have a lot of feathers used to make arrows in the warehouse. I think there are some griffin's feathers among them. I can pick them out and use them on the bait. The griffin skull is still there. I know where it's buried. It's easy to dig it out. Turistan shrank his neck as he spoke. Drillmaster Giles asked me to bury it somewhere far away. I was lazy and didn't go that far. Okay, all of these can be used. I'll ask Lord Snowy Owl for a griffin bait. I remember it was on the 3rd layer of the medicine cabinet in his room. Tron narrowed his eyes. So you've already set your sights on my things. The white-robed guardian appeared silently beside them. His movements were as stealthy as Snowy Owl's. It's good to hear that you can use your brains to think of a solution. We don't rely on our muscles and teeth to defeat wild beasts. It has always been our brains. You have to leave tomorrow morning, so there isn't much time left. Since you have a plan, start preparing. Chapter 314. You can prepare and think at the same time and make the plan more detailed. Kale will go with you tomorrow. If you have any questions, just ask. Tron, come with me. I'll get you the decoy potion so you don't mess around with my things. Oh, Reynolds, wait for Tron for a while. He'll take you to choose armor and weapons after he gets the potion. Okay. Reynolds hurriedly agreed. Tron supported the old man. The wrinkled and loose skin in his palm still exuded a warm warmth. Tron, this time, you have to be the leader when we go out. Kale is usually strict with you, and that's a good thing. But when you're out on a mission, the accumulation of past emotions isn't entirely a good thing. So, when you need to make up your mind and make a decision, you have to do it. This is your responsibility. I've only been out on a mission once. You've already completed your studies, haven't you? Tron, you have to remember that you have to shoulder the responsibility first, and then experience can play a role. Wu Mama and Touriston will listen to you. Reynolds is older than you, but I don't think he's the kind of person who likes to be in the limelight now. He'll fully respect your decision. Only when you take the lead can everyone's strength be unified. I understand. Lord Snowy Owl, do you think we could defeat the Griffins this time? The old man stopped, turned his head, and looked at him solemnly. Tron, remember my words. Whether you can or not doesn't depend on what I'm saying to you now, but on how you've studied here for the past 10 years. I believe you have the potential to achieve any victory, but I'm worried about one thing. Tron suddenly became nervous and hurriedly asked what he had done wrong. As a monster hunter, you're always alone, which means there's no backup. Because there's no backup, all the training of the Eagle School is to fight until victory. The white-robed guardian lowered his voice and said, there are actually many choices other than accepting and completing a mission. If you encounter a problem, or if there's no way to find and kill the Griffins within a month, what will you do then? Tron, when you need advice outside of fighting, ask Reynolds. He used to be a noble, and he'll see some things more tactfully than you. Tron frowned. It was obvious that he didn't understand. He came to the Ice Peak Fortress when he was 6 years old. It had been 12 years since then, and he had been living in this small world. What the nobles outside were like was only heard from the travelers, bards, and drunken drinkers in the taverns of Collinwood every winter. He could not understand the meaning of the white-robed guardian's words, but he could first memorize it and then do as he was told. If it starts snowing and you haven't caught a griffin yet, then come back. If they couldn't go down the mountain to hide, then they wouldn't go down the mountain. In the worst-case scenario, they would just have to endure the dangerous winter together. There are ghosts everywhere and dangers everywhere, but there's still a chance of survival. It's better than being trapped in the snow. Lord Snowy Owl, I'm confident that we can complete the mission before the time limit. The white-robed watcher patted Tron's cheek gently and said slowly, I know. Tron followed the white-robed watcher to get the decoy potion. Wu Mama and Touriston hurriedly went to prepare their luggage. One returned to her room, while the other went to the storage room. Renaud was the only one who stayed. He had to wait for Tron to come back, and then they would go and choose a weapon together. What weapon should I use? Renaud half reclined on the chair, looking at the ceiling, his thoughts flying. I already have the soul-harvesting dagger that I can summon at any time. It can directly absorb souls, so there shouldn't be anything more threatening than that, right? In that case, I don't need to consider the damage. I'll choose based on the weapon's characteristics and weight. Range combat is safer than close combat. I don't know how to use a bow, but I definitely have to bring crossbow. A heavy crossbow is better than a light crossbow. Anyway, I probably only have one chance to shoot. Renaud whispered to himself, completely unaware that a figure was slowly approaching. If the griffin pounces on me, a spear is better. A spear looks longer and more powerful, but it has the word spear in it. Since ancient times, spearmen have low luck. Why do spearmen have low luck? The sudden voice almost made Renaud fall out of his chair. He scrambled to keep his balance, then rolled his eyes at the female elven paladin who came uninvited. You scared me. Are you a paladin or a thief? How come you don't make any sound when you walk? Because there are cushions under my boots, so I won't be tired when I walk. Being quieter is just an additional effect. The elf tilted her head slightly and continued to ask, "You still haven't said why your luck is low? It's just a superstition that can't stand the test of truth. Or you can think that I'm just making up a reason for not wanting to carry a spear." "Oh, I understand this explanation. But there's something I want to ask you." The elf scratched her head. "As a devil, why did you come to the goddess fortress?" Renault's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that she saw through it? Didn't the fork demon promise that no one would find out? The devil lied to me? No, this is a bit illogical. If this female paladin knew that I was a devil, then she should have drawn her sword to kill me by now. Moreover, if she had doubts, she wouldn't have come alone. The paladin team outside, especially Rem, would be more than happy to cut off the head of a devil like me. So, she's trying to trick me. Renault knew that the priests and paladins of this world had the ability to distinguish lies with divine spells, so he had to use a profound, ambiguous way of talking to her. "I don't deny that I've misbehaved in the past, and that's why I'm here. Here, I'll bid farewell to the past and use my power to serve the goddess. Isn't this the purpose of Iceberg Fortress?" "Yes, it makes sense." The elf paladin nodded vigorously. The devil's motive is always to harm others for his own benefit, so cooperating with the devil has never been a good choice. It's very wise of you to be able to see this clearly and get rid of the devil. Renault frowned. "I have a question. How do you distinguish the devil? How can you tell from the past?" "I have a talent in this area. After special training and the blessing of the goddess, I'm very strong. I can smell the devil's scent on you, but it's very faint, very old, and not very strong. There are 3 possibilities. Either you've recently encountered a devil, or you've been in contact with a devil, or you're a weak, low-class devil." Chapter 3:15. Reynolds immediately understood after considering his own situation. He was now a devil, but the proportion of devil in his soul was very small, so his aura was easily covered by the human part. He didn't use much of his contract magic, but that should have helped a little. In the goddess fortress, there are only faithful believers and holy knights who can kill devils, so no devils would take the risk to come here. This possibility doesn't exist. Weak devils can't perfectly turn into humans, so this possibility is also eliminated. So you think that the biggest possibility is that I've met a devil. Generally speaking, there's nothing wrong with this idea, but you've actually overlooked a possibility. What possibility? A pair of green eyes shone. There's a particularly powerful devil that almost perfectly blended in with the humans. Everyone in the fortress was fooled, and only a bit of his aura was revealed in front of the female elven holy knight. Maybe it was an accident, or maybe he purposely revealed a bit to arouse the holy knight's curiosity and make her want to investigate, then slowly fall into the devil's hands. Wow, that's a good plan, and it's a possibility that I didn't think of. I think your idea can be written into an interesting book. The holy knight smiled happily and extended her hand to Reynolds. "Deidre Andemir. You can also call me Dee or Dilly. This way, you won't need to call me female elven holy knight in the future. Reynolds Hall, I'll definitely become Reynolds Iceberg in the future. Lord Kipling said that I'll have a nickname after the ceremony, but I don't know now. You could just call me Reynolds. There's no abbreviation. I've heard stories about you. Almost everyone warned me to stay away from you, probably because you're a serious threat to girls. Now it seems that you've definitely borrowed the devil's power." Deidre quietly pointed in the direction of the fortress castle gate. "Rem doesn't like you very much and kept talking about you on the way here. He should have just told you his true feelings, and then the 2 of you would have settled it with a night duel instead of causing trouble for you. By the way, what did you do with the prince that he keeps talking about?" "I really don't remember. The name Prince sounds familiar, but that's all." "Then you really are scum." Deidre pursed her lips. "Forgetting the past is also a crime. Did you know that? Please put the blame on the devil." Seeing Dilly roll her eyes, Reynolds asked curiously, "What does Prince have to do with you?" "Of course not with me, but she's Reem's childhood sweetheart, a distant cousin, and they're engaged." "That's what Reem said." but I don't know what happened to the engagement. If you want to know, you can ask Rem. If Renaud wanted to commit suicide, he would definitely ask Rem about it. Fortunately, he was not stupid. Looking at the lively and beautiful female elven holy knight in front of him, an interesting idea suddenly popped up in Reynolds's mind. Tilly, are you free for the next period of time? Can you help us hunt griffins? I belong to the Sacred Heart, not the Sacred Body. Why do you have such thoughts? Because destroying the griffins is a good thing. Is it wrong? Renaud tapped his palm with his finger and listed the benefits of doing this. The earlier the griffin dies, the safer the surroundings will be. The people and the goddess will be happy. Your help will increase the chances of success. As long as your martial arts skills are passable with you and the team, you will be able to witness our efforts and prevent Rem from finding fault with us. But most importantly, I think you're very interesting. You should be a good partner and a trustworthy friend. Okay. Deidre's eyes narrowed into 2 crescent moons, and she nodded with a smile. I'll go tell the bishop, and then I'll leave with you tomorrow morning. She turned and walked away with a swift and decisive attitude. But after 5 steps, she turned back. Renaud, there's one more thing that needs to be resolved. You're asking me for help, right? You're not from the Sacred Heart, and you're not my superior, so according to the rules, I can't serve you for free. Then what do you want? I don't have much money, or at least I don't think I have enough money to hire you. What do you like to do? Do you like listening to stories and singing? I can accept listening to stories, but there can't be elves in them. Deidre turned and left again, leaving behind a string of clear and melodious voice. You have to tell an interesting story. Deidre disappeared into the corridor outside the door, and this unexpected help gave Renaud more confidence in the mission of hunting the griffins. However, how to make good use of this help still needed to be carefully considered. So Renaud sat down and tried to expand his thoughts, estimating various situations, and of course, preparing the reward for Deidre, an interesting story that she had never heard before. And it would be best if he could tell it within a month. After a while, Tron came back with a small bag on his shoulder that reached his ribs. Presumably, it contained the potions needed for this mission. Renaud, let's go to the armory. I just tricked Deidre to go with us. Deidre is that female elven paladin. What? Tron opened his mouth wide. How did you do it? I sincerely invited her, that's all. Renaud didn't understand why Tron was so surprised. However, when he thought of Tron's almost completely closed military life in Iceberg Fortress since his childhood, his lack of experience in dealing with women was understandable. If you don't object to her joining, then shouldn't you take me to the armory? Of course not. Although the paladins of the Sacred Heart are not as good as the monster hunters of the Sacred Body, they are at least qualified warriors. They can perform better in other fields. Ah, what nonsense am I talking about? The armory is over here. The current situation was that one more person meant one more strength. Even if it was one more weapon, armor, or weight, it would be good. This was also why Renaud had to carry weapons, even though he had not received any training in the use of weapons. According to the previous plan, Renaud decisively chose a light and tough spear as his main weapon for close combat, and then brought a short and thick dagger with a wide blade and a serrated back for daily use. For a long-range weapon, he found a crossbow with a handle, which didn't require much strength when loaded. There were a total of 20 bolts in the 2 boxes. However, he and Tron had a little disagreement when it came to armor. I've seen the claws of the griffins. They can even scratch through the bones of horses. I don't think armor is of any use. Anyway, I'll die if I get hit, so I might as well go into battle with light armor. That way, I can be more flexible. Chapter 3:16. The armor is not for you to face the griffins. It is for you to live to see the griffins. If the griffins are the only threat in the Sunset Mountains, then there is no threat at all. At least you know what a wolf is. It's the same. Reynolds shook his head. I've only been training for 2 months. I'm just a burden in battle. The only use of the armor is to immobilize me. Look at these joints, these nails and belts. These things will kill me first. Then, Tron thought for a moment. How about this? I'll find you a set of cotton armor. It will get colder in the mountains. You have to wear something warm. As for the rest of the protection, go find Touristin and help him carry his things. Dry rations and sundries can also be used as protection. Ha ha. Reynolds thought for a moment and finally agreed. We'll have another companion? Then we'll have to prepare another person's worth of food and recalculate the camping supplies. How troublesome. Tarastin slumped onto the table with a thud, causing the chalk on the table to jump up and roll around in a mess. Reynolds leaned over and stared at it for a moment. Is this an equation? You're listing the shelf life, weight, and volume of different things? Yes. Touristin sighed. I went to ask the paladins where the incident happened and found that it was very far from the village and the other fortresses. In other words, we need to take care of all the food and accommodation on our own. But there's a limit to how much we can carry. We can't carry everything on our backs, right? Reynolds nodded and once again looked at the items Ben had listed on the blackboard. Hard bread, cheese, jerky, pickled vegetables. These are all hard vegetables. Seems like it won't be difficult to replenish water along the way. Yes, there are springs and rivers in the Sunset Mountains, so water is not a big problem. In other places, we have to add water. Water is heavy, so it will be even more difficult. I think I understand how you calculated in the past. It's very primitive. Reynolds shook his head. You forgot 3 important parameters. You also didn't organize the data properly. Parameters? Data? What does that mean? Touristin's eyes widened as he pricked up his ears. First, weight. In addition to weight, volume, and shelf life, different things should have different importance. Clothes, food, water, medicine, and weapons have different effects on survival and completion of the mission. You should take them into consideration. Then there's the coordination. I think that you want to simply increase the number of ambassadors, but in reality, the more important thing is how to arrange the order in which the items will be used. You seem to have simply and naturally followed the basic principles. Use the things that are easy to rot early and carry less of them. But in reality, there was still a huge amount of potential to be unearthed. A reasonable arrangement of pasta and meat is more meaningful than simply eating less. In the end, I confused the biggest with the most economical. The number on your blackboard is the weight, right? It was too small. We've just left the stronghold, so it's not dangerous at this time. We don't need to calculate the economic cost of a battle. We should treat it like donkeys. We can hide some supplies with a long shelf life in some safe places along the way. This is called preloading. Then, we can release the load and enter a light combat state. Using this method to shorten the supply distance also reduces the difficulty of supply. After Reynolds finished speaking, Tarastin's gaping face had completely stiffened. His 2 round eyes stared helplessly at the empty space. This is too complicated. No one knows how to calculate it, and no one can calculate it. That's not entirely true. There is no way to calculate an accurate and universal dynamic matrix, but an approximate optimal solution for the current situation cannot be calculated. Sigh, if only I had a computer. Forget it. Let's not talk nonsense. Let's hurry up and calculate it. Help me mark the weights. Oh, that is, tell me the importance of each item. How does it become a number? Just rate it from 1 to 10. First, find something that you will definitely bring along, such as jerky. Then, give me a rough indication of how each item is related to it. You don't have to worry about the rest of the calculation. I'll do it. Oh, it would be even better if there was a map. Can you find one for me? Yes, of course. Tarastin licked his lips. Reynolds, can you teach me? No problem. It's just some data organization and algorithms. It's no different from the optimization in the past. Reynolds picked up 2 pieces of chalk and handed one to Tarastin. Come, let's hurry up and start. Tarastin took the chalk and nodded vigorously. He was the youngest member of Ice Peak Fortress. His body was chubby, not because he lacked training, but because he was too interested in managing the warehouse and kitchen. As the youngest child, he usually had to listen to other people's arrangements. However, being able to command apples, ale, flour, and bacon made him feel that he had some sort of power. This job originally belonged to the white-robed guardian. However, he was old, so everyone was happy to let Tarastin take this job. If he did not become an outstanding Eagle Sect monster hunter, but had the ability to manage the fortress warehouse, he would still be able to live well. Tarastin himself vaguely understood this principle. Thus, he was very diligent in his work and never slacked off. Thus, as Reynolds explained and calculated, he listened carefully and tried to understand. Even if he could not understand it immediately, it was still useful to try his best to remember it. The more he listened, the more he did not understand, but the more he admired him. Tarastin thought to himself that this noble was indeed impressive. He even understood such complicated knowledge. No wonder nobles were the ones who led the army. However, when Tarastin observed Reynolds' expression, he noticed a problem. Reynolds, who was immersed in the numbers and algorithms, had blood-red eyes. Flames burned in the depths of his pupils, as if they were solid, emitting an intimidating light. Faint black smoke rose from his nostrils, making him look like a monster from hell. Reynolds looked up, and all the abnormalities disappeared instantly. What is it? You don't understand? It's okay. We don't have much time today. I'll calculate first, and I'll explain it to you in detail later. How? How did you learn such complicated things? I've never seen the symbols you used. I don't mean anything else. I'm just saying, at least in the books on calculation in the library, there are no such things. If we can't do better than the people before us, wouldn't that be too sad? These are all obtained by continuing to think on the basis of our predecessors, and then through continuous practice. Reynolds did not find anything strange and continued with the work at hand. However, this time, when he was fully using his brain, he did not show the characteristics of a devil. Chapter 317. He quickly adapted to the intellect from hell. After his optimization and rearrangement, the group of people seemed to have more things to carry. Of course, in reality, such extra items did not exist. Everyone still had things that satisfied their personal needs, so the load would eventually be filled up. Set up 2 supply points. If Giles comes back early, he can help replenish them. This will reduce our pressure by a lot. Do you think there are any other problems? Tarastin shook his head. He had witnessed the structure and implementation of the optimization algorithm with his own eyes, so he knew he could not give any opinions. Of course, he could say that some of the weights could be improved and some of the data was not perfect, but these would only make the results more accurate, not more correct. What they wanted was a reliable and measurable estimate, not a precise prediction of everything that would happen in the next month. Reynolds, is this the power of numbers that Lord Snowy Owl talked about? Of course not. Numbers have no power, but thinking does. Reynolds moved his gaze away from the list and scanned the kitchen and the large storeroom that was used for storage. Tarastin, what other good things do we have here? We have been away for a month, so we need to find some fun to relax. There's a lot of wine, and some of them are quite good aged. Someone gave them to Lord Snowy Owl in the past, but after he became completely deaf, he was afraid that drinking would affect his eyes, so he stopped drinking. Reynolds shook his head. His soul did not know how to taste wine, so he did not feel much pleasure from it. His body had been tormented by alchemy potions in the past, so when he drank, he felt like he was drinking medicine. Many alchemy potions used wine as a solvent, so the taste would not disappear. We also have a few bottles of honey here. This is good stuff. As long as the lid is properly closed, it will not spoil for decades. Tarastin spoke with great familiarity, and then mentioned a dozen other things that had been kept here, but that Reynolds did not know about. What's in a box over there? There's a lot of dust on it. It looks like it's been there for many years. Oh, it's not food in there. A few years ago, many raging bears suddenly appeared in the Sunset Mountains. They were very aggressive and very smart, so they posed a great threat. The things in there are used to catch bears. Tarastin scratched his head. Later, after everyone's efforts, the number of raging bears decreased sharply, and those specially made things became useless. Lord Snowy Owl said that if we need to forge equipment in the future, we can melt those things and use them. Bear catcher? Unfortunately, He wasn't here to catch griffins. Bears can't fly. Reynolds said that it was a pity, but he still moved over. Reynolds. Tulliston suddenly stopped him. I'll go prepare the items according to the list on the blackboard. You can walk around here by yourself. Just don't break any jars. Also, write down what you took so that I can make a final tally. Sure. No problem. Reynolds waved his hand. I don't have anything else to do. See you tomorrow morning? Bain nodded, and the two of them split up. The Ice Peak Fortress was located on a cliff. To the west were mountains, and to the east were low hills and plains. Therefore, the nights were always early, but the mornings were very punctual. When the orange-yellow sunlight shone from the edge of the horizon and pierced through the dark gray clouds, a group of 5 people and 2 horses was ready to set off. Renaud, don't you have an appointment with Lady Paladin? When can she come? Tron breathed hard in the cold morning air, as if this could calm his anxious mood a little. Then, he asked and answered his own question. Paladins don't lie. She must have been delayed by something. Reynolds was silent in response. Then he yawned loudly. Reynolds, you look terrible. The dark circles under your eyes look like you've been punched. Didn't you sleep last night? Too nervous? Do you talk too much when you're nervous? Reynolds smiled. He was very tired, but he had a confidence that Tron couldn't understand. I meditated on the top of the tower last night, constantly thinking about this mission. I was so engrossed that I didn't sleep at all. This is definitely not nervousness, but concentration. All right. Anyway, it won't be like this when we actually start the mission. You have to rest and come back quickly, because we all have our own duties. Tron glanced at the silent galley, then said, At most, we have to wait until the sun completely rises above the ground, and then we have to set off. Someone's coming, Tulliston said. Reem Gary Quasi-Inspector, a man who could get a word count just by writing his name once, walked towards the morning sun. 4 of the 5 members of the Griffin hunting group snorted in unison. Only Tulliston couldn't help but fart a little. For this, he was very sorry. I wish you a successful mission and a successful return. Rem yawned as he spoke, then inhaled the fresh morning air deeply into his lungs. The temperature is starting to drop. Have you all brought warm clothes? Let's talk about something practical. Galley rubbed his nose with his left hand, then blew an old booger on the ground. When will the food for the winter in Ice Peak Fortress be distributed? Soon, very soon. When you come back with the heads of the griffins, it will be distributed, Rem said with a smile. The church's fortress defense line has been too peaceful in recent years, so it has suffered a lot of misunderstandings. Those nobles are staring at us like hungry wolves, their minds full of conspiracies and fantasies of the church amassing troops to kill them. So, we have to use practical results to convince them. The best way is to use the heads of monsters. If you have the heads, you will be rewarded. If you don't, you will be punished. Rem's gaze swept across everyone, then met Reynolds' eyes. He stopped, but continued. Let me give you an example. If someone slacks off during a mission, hiding in the mountains and forests to waste time, turning their duty into a walk, then this is a lie and blasphemy to the goddess. For such a person, the punishment will follow like a shadow. Reynolds looked at Rem and suddenly felt that he was very handsome. It was the kind of handsomeness that made people angry when they saw him, the kind that made them want to break his nose and help him become a normal person again. He really wanted to put his thoughts into action, but he was afraid that he was not Rem's match in terms of strength. Although Rem's intelligence and knowledge would definitely crush him, there was no way to compare. People like Rem would only fight in areas they were familiar with and would not accommodate others. Quasi-Inspector, Galley licked his teeth, rolled his eyes, and said with an almost inhuman expression, Please help us pray to the goddess that we can find the griffins and kill them. Chapter 3:18. Our abilities are weak, and we need a lot of help to succeed. You are our superior, so you are a general in the army, right? The name of the victor of a war is always the general's. The name recorded when a war was lost was also the general's. You're placing too much importance on the success or failure of this mission. It doesn't have that much of an impact. It can't be compared to the war at all. Rem faced the morning sun, his face turning from orange to red. Just like how the sun will rise again every day under the care of the goddess, this is just a normal mission. I sincerely wish you success, because there will be many things in the future that will need your help. The morning sun is beautiful, but it is the beginning of every day. Every day. It's about time. You should be on your way. Renaud squinted his eyes and looked back at the sun. The red ball of light was still a little attached to the horizon. This was enough time for him to say goodbye to Rem, but he really couldn't stand this annoying guy anymore. Graccha Mother Gary, I have been busy preparing for the mission, and it is impolite of me not to say something. We are very sorry for the 2 knights who died protecting the others when you were attacked by griffins on the way. How many of you were there? I can't count well, but it must be more than 5, right? Touristin quickly covered his mouth. Renaud was the best calculator he had ever seen. What I mean is, please don't worry. Your sorrow will be comforted by us, and righteous things like revenge and destroying monsters should be left to qualified warriors. Isn't just griffins? Kill them. You haven't done it, but you still have me, right? Rem pulled his long sword out with a whoosh, but before he could pull it out halfway, Renaud had already jumped behind Troon Cayley to hide. The holy emblem on the quasi-inspector's chest trembled, and he quickly calmed down. The long sword returned to its sheath, but his teeth didn't stop grinding. At this critical and awkward moment, he needed the power to change the situation. Because of this, Ygritte appeared. She jogged all the way, and with a crash, she braked in front of Renaud and said in a hurried tone, "Let's go. Well, my teacher will wake up soon. You want to go too?" Rem was stunned. "If you tell on me now, I will knock you out, but after I leave, you can say whatever you want, I don't mind. Also, I left a letter for the bishop." Ygritte flipped his hair. "All right, there's one more thing. I asked the bishop to wait for me here. Anyway, he doesn't pay much attention to me when he's with his old friends, so he won't be lonely. If you have time, please take care of me." "I will, thank you." The elven girl paused for a moment and said to Rem in Elvish, "Thank you." Reynolds realized that he actually understood. It was probably the memories and abilities of others that helped him. After gathering 6 people, everyone didn't stay any longer. They picked up their bags and set off. Ygritte had snuck out on her own. Apart from her weapons and armor, she did not bring any other luggage. However, Touristin had already prepared a package for her. She glanced at it and felt that she was being treated the same as everyone else. She felt that nothing in the world could be fairer than this, so she carried it without another word. In fact, there was a huge difference in the weight of each person's items. Tron was the lightest, while Renaud and Turaz were the heaviest. Renaud's arrangement was mainly related to the division of labor. With Gally's arm injured, Tron had to take on more of the responsibility of guarding and clearing the way. This meant that he had to run around and climb up and down, and needed to conserve more energy. Therefore, the lighter the load, the better. Gally was injured, so he naturally had to be taken care of. Wu Mama's body was slender, like a slightly malnourished girl, so she couldn't carry the heaviest load. Touristin insisted on this, and Renaud felt that there was no need to object. Anyway, he was very conscious. If he couldn't fight, then he would be a porter. That way, if he encountered danger, he would immediately hide behind his teammates and wouldn't feel guilty. He believed that everyone just had a different division of labor. A better overall arrangement and more efficient use of everyone's strengths was better than being completely uniform. Moreover, he had a job that no one else had, telling stories. A story of 3 countries? But I've never heard of a country called Winter, and it's just one country. You're not lying to me, are you? Renaud rolled his eyes at Ygritte and then sighed. Based on his calculations and planning, he naturally knew that the weight on the female paladin's shoulders was lighter than his, but she was at least an order of magnitude more relaxed. He didn't know how those arms and legs, which were obviously thinner than his, could contain so much strength. He looked at Wumama again and was shocked to realize that he was too weak. But when it came to storytelling, these people were all trash. Renaud was a person who often listened to storytelling, so he was better than them. History is serious. I can't just make it up, can I? So, I can only create a country that you've never heard of to put the story. Pay attention to the characters and don't worry about the names. Yes, listen to Renault. That's right. Touristin was busy wiping his sweat, but he didn't stop supporting his companions. Okay, okay, I won't worry about the weird names and how 3 countries became one. But when you tell stories, why do you always say SUA? Is it some kind of quirk? I'm practicing magic, Renault replied. The true thunder goddess had her own divine arts, but she didn't reject other powers. She treated them all equally. Dragons could fly in the sky and breathe fire. Snakes could swim underground. These weren't divine arts, so there was no reason why people couldn't learn magic. What she was against was destructive, harmful, and contrary to the basic nature of living creatures. Renault was also against magic research and abuse. So, if it weren't for the hindrance caused by his identity as a devil, he didn't mind spending most of his time on magic research. The environment for magic research was relaxed, so Renault could openly say that he was practicing magic. Not long ago, I found a spell that allows me to move objects simply with my will. I've tried to cast this spell over and over again, and I've discovered 3 interesting phenomena. Gigret was a little disappointed. She wanted to listen to stories, not magic. She regretted asking Renault about SUA. But as a paladin, it was very important to respect others as equals. She felt that if she could like to listen to stories, then Renault could also like to study magic. First, it doesn't take much effort for me to cast this spell. I have to do a lot of physical exercise every day, which consumes a lot of energy, but it doesn't affect my ability to cast spells, except that I'm too thirsty and my throat doesn't listen to me. Chapter 319. Second, continuous practice has made the effect of the spell stronger. Now, I can move heavier objects and do faster movements. The third and most interesting point is that the success of the spell has nothing to do with my pronunciation, but whether I think my pronunciation is correct or not. Oh, come on. Gigret blinked quickly. Now, can you tell me what happened next? Who is more powerful, the butcher or the jujube seller? No, you changed the topic too abruptly. Haven't you ever thought about why things would move just because I spoke? Is there any reason? You chanted the spell that suits you, so it should be effective. Is there any reason for this? Since the Creator created the world, the goddess of thunder and truth has been watching over and taking care of everyone, rewarding those who are right and punishing those who are wrong. You did the right thing. There's a reward. You have to thank the goddess. But I can't use the same method to cast the spell. I've tried. Reynolds wanted to say, but I'm a demon. The goddess won't care. But he was afraid that the goddess would care through the sword of the Sacred Heart Paladin. The goddess has her own plans. You can experience it, but don't speculate. Gigret became serious, which made Reynolds know that he should continue with the romance of the 3 kingdoms, adapted for a different world. Gigret heard the rest of the story as she wished, but she had a lot of opinions about the plot, where an inconspicuous character who made straw sandals could defeat 2 powerhouses at the same time. Reynolds ignored her opinion. He was still thinking about the question that popped up when all the Earthlings successfully cast the spell. What was going on? The morning was cold, and there was a trace of loneliness in the thin fog. There was a layer of frost on the sleeping blanket. Like the damp rock under the body, it would not warm up again. Autumn was left with its last breath of heat, and winter was squeezing its throat with both hands. Reynolds woke up shivering and couldn't sleep. His body kept shaking, which was a sign that his muscles were trying hard to generate heat. This kind of shivering made the white fog he exhaled intermittently, but it was enough for Wu Mama to know that he had woken up. Reynolds, there's soup hot. The soft call gave him strength, urging him to slowly squeeze out of the sleeping bag. The others were still resting. It was not easy for everyone, so it was best not to wake them up. They rested behind a rock on a leeward hillside. The space was not big, and it was a little far from the forest, so they could not make a big campfire. The flames in front of Reynolds and Wu Mama could only heat up a teapot. However, when one's hand neared the flame, that bit of heat was enough to revive a person. pine needles, and some mint. Drink it. Wu Mama poured half a cup of hot tea for Reynolds and said, "Warm your hands first. If you can move, you can work, and you can make it through." Wu Mama usually did not talk much, but at this time, he became more talkative. Reynolds understood this change. In order to avoid being attacked by wild beasts at night, they had to take turns keeping watch every day. This meant that they had to face the darkness alone most of the night. Starlight and moonlight are good friends, but all sounds are enemies. When the wind blew through the branches, over the ridges, and through the crevices of the rocks, it would make different whispers, like the gentle breath of a resentful banshee. Big animals and small animals stuffed their emotions into the wind, suddenly piercing into the heart of someone who was already too tense. This was pure torture. In particular, when he heard the crisp sound of a branch being broken, the night turned into the figures of all kinds of monsters in his imagination. At this time, they could only prick up their ears and be alert, not daring to sleep. However, after a while, people would doubt whether the previous crack had happened or not, and whether it was an illusion. There was no way to verify it, and no way to tell others, so when the night watch was about to end and some friends woke up, people were talkative. "It's the 10th day. Can your body still hold on?" Wu Mama gently broke a branch and stuffed it into the campfire. Soon, people who felt the change in light would wake up one by one. It was time to increase the firepower and heat up the dry food. "I have never suffered like this before, so unless I can't hold on, I can't answer you." Reynolds drank a mouthful of tea with the fragrance of plants. Vitality flowed into his body with the heat, and the feeling was no different from being resurrected from hell. "Well, Mama, what are we eating for breakfast?" "There is still enough portable dry food left for one meal, which is today's breakfast. Soak it in boiling hot spring water, add some wine, and 2 cloves of garlic. After that, we have to decide what to eat based on the hunting situation or dried meat strips." For Dilly, the trouble is about to start. Wu Mama nodded. The elves' custom was not to eat meat. Their needs for protein and oil were all solved from plants. Everyone had been saving dry food for Ygritte, leaving the purely plant-based biscuits and bread for her. However, these things would go bad in the wild one day and could not last longer than salted meat strips. "Unless they're dehydrated vegetables or canned food," Reynolds muttered. Wu Mama heard it, but pretended not to hear it. In fact, the main reason was that she did not understand. For the past 10 days, Reynolds had been practicing his incantation. Even when he was telling stories, the phrase SUA had become a common curse in everyone's minds. Even when they were sleeping, the phrase SUA would echo in their dreams. It could not be helped. His stories were too good, and he practiced too hard. In order to get the former, they had to endure the latter. In addition to SUA, Reynolds was also experimenting with other spells. Therefore, from time to time, he would say words that no one understood, such as dehydrated vegetables or canned food. At first, everyone was curious and would ask him what those words were. Reynolds did not hide it and would tell everyone, but no one could understand. The things involved seemed to make sense, but it was more like some kind of imagination. Considering that Reynolds didn't seem to have gone crazy, the things that everyone couldn't understand must be magic incantations. At this time, Ygritte turned over and swung her arms from one side of the water bag to the other, almost hitting Ramstein's round nose. "Food," she said vaguely. Ygritte was the only one who slept with her arms outside the sleeping bag. The temperature in the mountains did not seem to have any effect on her. Not only that, but in terms of endurance, flexibility, and strength, she also overwhelmed the few people except Kale and Tron. This made Ramstein and Wu Mama a little depressed. Chapter 320. However, Gaelet said that Ygritte's ability came from the goddess, while their ability came from daily training and practice, which was actually better than hers. Reynolds couldn't see the advantage of physical training over magic training, but he wouldn't point it out. Whether it was physical strength, magic power, divine power, or the power of hell, As long as it could meet his expectations, it was good. He watched Jigret turn over and said to Wu Mama, "It seems that he's about to wake up. You continue to watch outside. I'll make breakfast." Wu Mama seemed to have said enough and became silent again. He looked out from the edge of the rock, and the morning light and mist touched his face, melting the looming white frost. At this time, Reynolds felt that he was a woman, sitting in a painting, staring at the future. It must be an illusion caused by the monotonous food. Weighted overall calculation could improve the efficiency of the use of items, but in many ways it was not good for the stomach. This bad effect would become more and more serious as they stayed in the wild longer. At this time, the distant memories of various delicious dishes in his previous life would emerge and torture him, just like hell to the souls of ordinary people. Reynolds realized more and more that he couldn't get rid of the curse that he couldn't get rid of. His only way to deal with it was to divert his attention. SUA. As he focused, several things around him floated up one by one, and then went to their respective destinations. Firewood, pot, water bag, dry food, seasoning. Reynolds couldn't move them all at the same time. He could only control one at a time. However, as long as the destination was set, the spell could make these items move by themselves. Although the speed couldn't be increased, just like a feather couldn't accelerate in free fall, at least until it encountered greater resistance or was controlled by the next issue, they would keep moving in a leisurely manner. Tron suddenly sat up and looked around vigilantly, but he didn't find any danger. He turned to look at Renault, who was constantly making sue sounds, and said, "I feel like my brain is being pulled into the air. This is really the scariest waking up spell. What's for breakfast?" It was Jigret's voice. Her voice had the beauty and quickness of the Elvish language, but also the brevity and strength unique to humans. After all, the Paladins of the Goddess were a militarized organization, mainly composed of humans, so this brevity was a habit developed during training. What else can it be? Soak dry food in wine and add a little stimulating taste. Reynolds stirred the steaming soup pot with a long ladle, hoping to melt the dry food inside more evenly. After this meal, there will be no more dry food, so we can only eat meat. Jigret, what about you? I'll eat whatever you guys eat. Meat is fine too. There was nothing strange in the elf's voice. She crawled out of her sleeping bag and stuck her head out to look into the soup pot, as if she wanted to see the difference in the soup every day. I asked the goddess if I could eat meat, and she said no problem. I've eaten it before. I'm not used to the taste, but my stomach can accept it. You're the first elf I've ever heard of who eats meat. Gally moved quickly after he woke up. He was already folding his sleeping bag. Don't worry too much. We'll look for plant-based food along the way. In fact, if it wasn't for Wu Mama's rough method of destroying the traces yesterday, we could have followed the squirrels and found some nuts from their nests. I'm sorry. Wu Mama lowered her head. Galliel did not continue to criticize him. This was very different from usual, but everyone liked the change. Today's mission is very important. Everyone, stay alert. Ramstein, stop rubbing your eyes. First, tell me what we're going to do today. Fatty stopped half of his yawn and quickly said, "We found the place where the knights were attacked 3 days ago. Following the clues there, we followed the griffin's nest all the way. Yesterday, we found another place where it attacked, and it was newer than the previous one. Today's mission is to start searching from this place. It's best if we can get close to the griffin's nest, or at least lock down its range of activity, and then find a place to set a trap. Tron, is there anything we need to pay attention to?" Galliel had already folded his sleeping bag and tied it up, so he continued to ask. "The griffin may appear at any time, so we need to be on high alert. Therefore, there must be 2 pairs of eyes looking at the sky at all times." Tron spoke as he thought. The crossbow should be ready to fire, and 2 people should keep a safe distance from each other. From now on, we'll be in a light combat state. This will be our second supply and retreat location. Are we going to prepare for battle? Renault thought for a moment, and let himself be excited and nervous. He could still clearly remember the attack when he first arrived at the Ice Peak Fortress, and the scene when the griffin's claws slid past his eyes. If he recalled carefully, he seemed to be able to remember a little earlier when the griffin hovered in the sky, looking down and choosing its prey. That was the gaze of a hunter, and now he wanted his eyes to emit that gaze. Is it that if we keep quiet today, we can't listen to the story? Ygritte suddenly thought of this and felt a little unhappy. Tron looked at Renaud and Ygritte and thought that if the female paladin could protect Renaud, it would definitely be a good thing. So he said, as long as we keep our voices down, we can still talk. I think there may be fog today, so we still need to rely on sound to determine everyone's situation. There are not only griffins in the mountains, but also other things. After everyone got up, they warmed their bodies with hot soup, then extinguished the bonfire and cleaned the camp. They hid some things in the shelter of the big rocks, and then went into the battle lightly, continuing to search for the griffin's location. Fortunately, it's close to winter. Most of the creatures either go to warm places to hide from the wind and snow, or hibernate in caves until spring. This has reduced our risks along the way. Tron walked from the back of the team to the front and said to Renaud as he passed, "The Sunset Mountains are not like this in other seasons. Do not leave the road and walk into the mountains without completing your training. Renaud, be careful." "Be careful." Renaud nodded and then pulled the straps of his backpack to make his shoulders more comfortable. Although they were all light, Renaud's backpack seemed to be heavier than the others, and he needed to adjust his posture frequently. It was a kind of short rest, and also to prevent the wounds under the cotton armor from being torn open again. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.